I'd like to call the Commission meeting to order. This is a monumentous day. I'm glad to see a lot of concerned citizens here about their community. We're going to have an open public meeting, comment period. I opened the meeting at 2. We recessed right away to an executive session. We're now closing that executive session and reopening the public meeting. There's a couple points I'd like to make before we get started. One is today, this special meeting is on the waterfront development, and we'd like to keep the public comment today about the waterfront development. A week from today, we have our regularly scheduled commission meeting, and any comments other than Harcourt can be, or the waterfront development can be at that time. We're going to have public comment for the first 15 minutes, and then in Ireland, they're 8 hours ahead of us, so we're going to have Harcourt talk, and it's going to be at 11 at night. Then after they have some comments, we're going to have a presentation, and then we're going to close recess the public meeting and take a break from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Then we'll reconvene the public meeting at 6, and we can get more people. Anyone who wants to comment again or at that time are welcome to do it. We would have liked to have had the whole meeting at night for this one, but in Ireland, if it started at 7, it would have been 3 in the morning. And so we're trying to accommodate our master developer as well as the public. So that's why we have 2 sessions. So with that in mind, we'll start with the public comment period. Please, when you introduce yourself, give your address, and also limit your comments to 3 minutes if possible. Our first, some added ones here at the end. Our first person is Mike Kimmich. Kimmick.
Thank you.
Okay, you can use the podium if you'd like, or speak from there.
My address is 2326 Henry Street, and I've got one question which will precede my comment. So the question is there anything in this very voluminous document that would preclude the public use of Central Avenue as a entry point from the water to the various areas of downtown and Old Town? So that's the question. Is there anything in this document that would preclude using Central Avenue as an entry point from the water?
Do you want to answer that?
The simple answer is no. There's nothing in this document that would preclude any kind of connection from Central down to the waterfront site.
Okay. That being said, then, I've been involved in this visioning since '95, I believe. They've started the visioning in the downtown, in the Old Town, and the Whatcom waterfront. And in virtually every one of those visioning statements, there was involved a entryway from the water to the downtown core, to Old Town, and the rest of the area. That was in virtually every one of those visioning statements. And yet, in the very first thing that the development that the port is actively looking at, there's no mention of that. The wharfage on Central, or on the waterfront with access from Central. And I just, as a comment, I was just amazed that the port didn't put this into part of the program. Now, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our second public comment is George Dyson.
Yes,
misunderstood your logistics. I thought we were signing up to comment in a public hearing addressing this question after your presentation. So I will, if I may, defer my comment until after we've heard from Harcourt. I think that's only fair before I criticize them, to hear what they have to say. So if you can put me, hopefully first early on the list for the later comment period. But I think first comment would be maybe be a little more explicit about how this is organized. Thank you.
That's a very good point. Once you see the presentation again, I've had a lot of phone calls, as both commissioners have, and emails in the last week. And once we talk through the development, the questions kind of go away. So after the presentation, you will have a chance at 6 o'clock to sign up again and talk if you so desire. And if you want to pass till then, like Mr. Dyson did, that's perfectly all right. The next person is Abe Jacobson, is it?
Thank you. I'm Abe Jacobson, and I live at 2314 Samish Way, Bellingham. And I have a comment on the proposed contract. I've read the materials at length. I note that this initial development is for adding more urban amenities to Bellingham, including retail and hospitality amenities. There are two problems, in my view, with this approach. First, employment in retail and hospitality sectors makes for notoriously low wages. This is just a fact of life. If you want to be poor, go to work in retail or hospitality in any job that isn't a manager or the lead chef. Second, Bellingham is already drowning in amenities, including retail and hospitality. These are the pillars of our poverty here. I can't tell you how many baristas we have with master's degrees from Western. Talk about underemployment. What we lack in Bellingham is enough good, solid, skilled technical employment with dependable and superior wages and benefits. I'm talking about the guy who aligns the drive shaft on my boat. I'm talking about the guy who can remount my engine on my boat. I'm talking about specialized technicians who are making $20 to $30 an hour. The Harcourt plan does nothing to address this need, and instead is just a plan to cannibalize bad business from existing establishments in the downtown across the street. I would have hoped, in other words, that the centerpiece of the Port Commission's initial stage would have something to do with the word port, P-O-R-T.
Thank you for your comments. The next person is Liz Washburn.
I'm going to pass until later.
Thank you. And if I forget to sign you up later, holler. The next one is Matt Patkus.
Yeah, it's about the BAAC. I just want to correct this. Is it okay to talk about that?
We would like to keep this just to the
I took the day off.
waterfront development.
I can come back next month. I did take the day off. So.
Can you come back next Tuesday when our regular?
Public comment period, I think it's important, that. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, hi. Sorry about that. I sit on the BAC. I'm a neighborhood representative, and we've been working hard for like 9 months, and I don't know. I'm going to sit down just for a second because I was thinking I was sitting up there, but we gave you guys a report and some ideas, and I'll just list them. And this is in regard to the airport, folks. So it's just some ideas that we have to protect the communities and all that good stuff. We as a group are made up of business, tourism, neighborhoods, bunch of people, and we did have cat fights in there, but we came up with these following things. Develop a proactive approach to prevent future noise issues, participate fully in 2016 county and city comprehensive planning process, quality public involvement, and environmental and social impact statements for the community. And we really haven't heard back from the port. We've heard, we've had them come back. We've had port commissioners in there saying we're doing a good job one time and we're doing a bad job the next. And just at the last one, they said, I guess we weren't doing a good enough job because we got this email from not Art Chode, he's no longer with us, but Dan Zank. And I'll just sum up the last thing that he said. He says, I would like to work with you, April Baker, not the committee, to evaluate the committee's existing and future direction. And that's the only response we've gotten. And my concern is, you know, we've given you something that I hope you review. And my frustration is, I mean, and I'll submit this, is in you're saying we're doing a good job, we're doing a bad job. And I know that the employments are dropping. We're worried about Abbotsford. We're worried about Everett now being commercial airport. And I just hope that you guys are doing the right thing by saying, hey, we're gonna reevaluate this BIC, even though they took a long time to come up with these great solutions for the community, and postpone everything till June, so you guys can get a better idea of what you'd like to actually have us maybe answer you in the right way. Maybe that's how I should say it nicely, but is that what you're looking for, is a group of great people to answer you in the way that you'd like to hear? But I think there's a lot of great people in there. I think we made the right decisions. But again, thanks for your time and letting me not have to wait. I can go back to work, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for your comments.
So we're going to start the public presentation now for, we're going to do a brief PowerPoint to talk about Harcourt and the Waterfront District. I want to start off the presentation by introducing President Bruce Shepard from Western Washington University. He's going to say a few words about the waterfront.
Thank you much. On behalf of Western, I'm just here to express our deep appreciation at all the hard work, the hard work and real leadership that's taken a community with a lot of great ideas and come up with a proposal that I think we can all really be proud of. Western has been in this project from the get-go, from 2004, and been there consistently, serving throughout that time on the Whatcom Visioning Group, on the Waterfront Advisory Group, through to the development of the proposed master development agreement. And we've had really, at least at my level, just two very basic ideas. First, let's make sure that when it comes to this waterfront, it's an enormous resource for our community. Let's make sure that what is done there is something that our grandchildren, when we're cold in the grave, will look back and say, they got it right. And this, I think, is being done through all the hard work that has been put into this point, and in a way that is sustainable, that we can count on happening, that it isn't a bunch of pipe dreams, but is something that can actually on the ground be done. And so I commend those responsible for that. Secondly, the second point we've had very simply is that this isn't about Western. We aren't here to try to take something from the community. We're here to try to give something back. If we can be helpful, we're here. If not, tell us and we'll walk. But that's not been the case. We've been here to be a real partner in this project through what is our Community Engagement and Innovation Center, the Western Community Innovation Center. We look forward to that partnership in the future and continuing to be a help. I have a very simple slogan I preach on campus. Communities support universities that support communities. That's what we're about, and we're pleased to be here as part of the waterfront. Congratulations and thanks to all who have taken us to this point. Thank you much.
Thank you, President Shepard.
Thank you, President Shepard. We did change the order a little bit here. President Shepard's got some other business to attend to, but we're going to begin our PowerPoint now. I'm going to start off by talking about the history of the site, how we got to where we are today. In 2005, the port signed an agreement with Georgia Pacific to acquire the site. Lots of public process occurred after that. We had prior to that, we even had public process with the Waterfront Futures Group. After the site was bought, we formed the Waterfront Advisory Group. These were made of members, leaders of the community and other people, other folks. Lots of alternatives were studied. A SEPA review was conducted. Draft plans were prepared. Eventually, we got to a point in June of 2013 where the port issued a RFP, a request for proposals on the site. The port received 4 responses for what we consider to be master developer proposals. And we received 3 proposals for what we consider project-specific. The difference being the project-specific was an individual project proposal, such as the granary building, whereas the master developer proposals were for the entire, what we had requested proposals for, 10 acres. The port evaluated those over some time, and in September of 2000, along with others evaluating them, in September of 2013, we determined that Harcourt was the clear front runner and the one proponent that was capable of completing the development. And then in March, I think it was March 4th of 2014, we entered into what we called an exclusive negotiating agreement with Harcourt. This was all a very public process. This agreement was done in an open public meeting here at the port. About a month after that, what we call ENA, Exclusive Negotiating Agreement, was entered into. The port entered into or agreed to a term sheet. Again, in an open public meeting, that term sheet was published. It was put on the port's website. And that term sheet kind of outlined the deal terms or the deal points that we're at today. And those were the basic outline or framework of the MDA agreement. So that's a little background for you. A little bit about the site. We consider the site to have 5 unique areas. At the top there in the purple is what we call our marine trades area. This is marine trades. It always will be marine trades, and it has room for marine trades expansion. The bottom of the site in the orange, we have the Cornwall Beach area. This used to be owned 51% by the port, 49% by the city. The port really isn't in the business of doing parks, although we have a couple and we're proud of our parks. It's not something that we aspire to or consider to be in our domain. So we traded our 51% of Cornwall Beach for some land up in the marine trades area that the city owned. And it wasn't a cash transaction, it was a straight across trade. But that trade resulted in the city owning 100% of Cornwall Beach and the port owning a majority of the lands in the marine trades area. Ports do marine trades. That's what we know. It's what we're good at. So this kind of a swap made perfect sense, especially since it didn't involve any cash. If you look down at the green and the yellow portions of the site, this is what we consider to be our light industrial area. We have our shipping terminal there. It's a pretty underutilized asset at this time, but we're confident that if we combine that with the yellow log pond area, that we'll have enough critical mass to attract an industrial user and job-creating user for this portion of the site. Then we get to the blue area. That's the area we're going to talk about today. It's been the area of focus with Harcourt over the last year as we negotiated this agreement. And we'll move to the next slide to better define that area. It is a 37-acre site. Now, the agreement, or the MDA, is not for 37 acres. It's only for 18.8 of those 37 acres. But the entire site, including the western crossings portion of 6 acres, is included in that 37. It's expected to have an urban village type of a density to it. It's going to have both commercial and institutional mixed-use zoning. Commercial zoning means it will have residential, retail, and office. And I think it's important to know, because someone talked about the central connection, one of the things that Harcourt emphasized to us over and over again was that they believe it needs to have a lot of connections. This is the blue site, the downtown waterfront site, needs to have a lot of connections to the central business district, to the area in purple. They believe it needs to be almost seamless between downtown. We don't have 2 separate downtowns. We have one downtown. The waterfront is just a continuation of that downtown. So the original RFP, the request for proposals I mentioned earlier, was for 10.8 acres, and it's in those little triangles and around the granary building there. You see that highlighted in red. So evaluating the 4 proposals I mentioned that came in were the port, a team from the city, representatives from Western Washington University, from the county, and from a consultant hired by the port called Heartland. Not to be confused with Harcourt. It was just coincidence we had those 2 similar sounding names. The group unanimously selected Harcourt. We thought they were the ones with the balance sheet and the experience to be able to get the development done. After some talks with Harcourt, we determined that their plan for the site was largely consistent with the master plan. You see some drawings there of what the site could look like. I think the one thing I can say for certain is it probably won't look like that in 20 years. But that's the starting point. That's where they're getting off the ground. Because the plan is consistent with the master plan, there doesn't need to be any amendments at this time. However, that doesn't mean there won't be at some point in the future. It's just at this time, and at the beginning, early stages of their development, it is consistent with the master plan. There's going to have to be close coordination with Western Crossing. Western Crossing has 6 acres in that site. I'm going to try and highlight it here for you. Oops. Oh. Uh-oh. Okay, try this one more time. Okay, so the Western Crossing here is kind of right in this area right here. It's that rectangle is 6 acres. So there's going to have to be a lot of close coordination with Western Crossing, Harcourt, and the port to make sure that they fit in with the rest of the plan there and the zoning. So the master development area for Harcourt is outlined there in blue, so that's already been done for me, so I can't mess it up this time. It is outside of the 6 acres currently of Western Crossing, and it encompasses 18.8 acres. So proposed master development agreement, this is what we're talking about today. Harcourt Washington LLC is the name of the entity that, Harcourt Bellingham LLC, I'm sorry, that's a typo there. It should be Harcourt Bellingham LLC is the ownership structure and the name of the entity that'll be performing this work. The agreement has some key people in this entity. And one of the things the port was concerned about was that we would enter into an agreement with Harcourt, and then we would get some maybe junior folks or folks that we hadn't selected working on this project. So we built some provisions into the agreement calling for these key personnel to stay involved in the early stages of the agreement. And those key personnel are Pat Dougherty and Pat Power. And you're going to hear from Pat Power in a little bit via the telephone. I think one of the things that's important here, because I'm going to show you a schedule here in the next slide, but I think one of the things important to know is that this schedule is a default schedule. It's not a schedule at which we expect the pace of development to occur. We would expect the pace of development to occur at a faster rate than what's in this schedule. If it doesn't meet the schedule, then they're in default under the agreement. And that's the intent of the schedule, is to hold them to a faster pace than what is provided for in the contract. So here we go. Here's the schedule. The granary building should be completed by 2019. A second building on the site needs to be completed by 2021. A third building by 2024. 500,000 square feet need to be developed by 2029. And 1 million square feet need to be developed by 2034. There are provisions for market delays or market condition delays, and there's provisions for port environmental cleanup delays or for city infrastructure installation delays. Those are all baked into the agreement. So you're looking at that schedule thinking, what does that really mean? I'm going to throw out some comparisons here. We believe the Barclay Village development is about 750,000 square feet, about 750,000 square feet. And that has taken approximately 20 years to get to that level. The Bellwether Peninsula is another good example, and it's a waterfront example. It is 250,000 square feet, and it has taken almost 30 years to get to that density. So we're talking about a long-term build-out of this site. And I say that because I want people to really understand that we're not going to wake up tomorrow to an urban village of 5 or 10 buildings. That's just not going to happen. The pace of the development will be justified by the market, and that's one of the overlying terms that we agreed to with Harcourt early on. So how the project works, Harcourt will not take down 18.8 acres on day one. They will start the granary building on day one, and then they will propose a project to the port for some other additional acreage, whether that's 2, 3, maybe 4 acres that they will propose a project for. If the port approves that project, then they will go to the city for permitting of that project. So there's still a lot of checks and balances to come, even after this agreement is approved. The purchase price for the land we arrived at was $20 a square foot. That increases by 3% per year. They have an option to lease the price, The same terms that we lease most port property to tenants is at a port's ROI on the market value of the land. And they will pay $200,000 for the granary building. How we got to the price of $20 a square foot, we had 2 appraisals done. We valued the city's installation of infrastructure in the area. We decreased the value because it's a brownfield condition site. It has seismic consideration, and it's got a lot of underground industrial artifacts or infrastructure that will cause construction issues. And then the port never prioritized the price per square foot or the price per acre over the value of putting the land back to work. We want to see jobs on the site. We want to see the site back on the tax rolls. Those were heavy considerations in the pricing of the property. The MDA, or the Master Development Agreement, has a couple of provisions in it for market conditions, as I mentioned earlier. Those would be a 24-month delay. Should another recession like we had in 2008, 2009 occur, they could invoke that provision and delay their development by 24 months. If the delay is caused by a fault of the port in the environmental cleanup side of things, they could delay up to 36 months. If the delay is caused by the city not getting the installation of infrastructure in time, that also could be delayed by 36 months. As I mentioned earlier, there's still a lot of steps to ensure there's a quality development. Harcourt must propose a project to the port as they take down different chunks of land. It must be approved by the city. It must follow the master plan for the site, as already been approved by the Port Commission and the city councils. There are design standards in place. Should Harcourt invoke one of the delays, or should they not invoke one of the delays and be in default on the agreement, they have what we call a ROFO, a right of first offer. So if they default and they don't meet the development schedule as I've outlined to you, they go into a ROFO situation where we can then, the port can then take that property back out to the market, find other willing buyers or willing developers for the site, and put them and take their offer to Harcourt and say, okay, here's what we have. You said there's market conditions to delay this development. We've gone out and find another developer willing to do it. So you either step up and do the development or we take it to this other developer. So this right of first offer becomes really important if there's any delays on the site. So I think we're going to, well, let me talk really quickly about the next steps, and then we're going to hear from Harcourt. The next steps, we're going to have some public comment today. We're going to have a public comment period right after our presentation's done. Then we're going to have another one at 6 o'clock after another brief presentation is. The commission will take action on the master development agreement. And then there'll be some site preparation occurring. You're going to see a lot of activity down on this site over the next coming months as the environmental cleanup starts in the waterway and we start preparing the site for development. Phase 1 infrastructure will begin to be installed by the city in 2016 and 17, and then finally building construction will begin. And with that, I think we're going to dial in Harcourt.
Thank you, Rob.
So joining us for Harcourt, and it's the Ireland connection and the Ireland accent can be kind of tricky, so I'm going to ask everyone to kind of be quiet, please, and let the commissioners ask the questions. Pat Power will be joining us from Harcourt, and
they may talk Irish.
Pat has a heavy accent, and keep in mind it is 11:30 their time.
Port of Bellingham.
Hi, Pat, are you with us yet? Yes, sir. How are you doing, Pat? Thank you. You're in a room with probably about 60 folks and our 3 port commissioners, so I'm going to turn the microphone over to the commissioners, and you guys can talk.
Hi, Pat. This is Commissioner Dan Robbins. We have a group of citizens here, and one of the questions that a lot of citizens have asked me is why in the world Harcourt wants to come halfway around the world to do a development. And I was wondering if you could address that. Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any other questions?
Excuse me. This is Jim Jorgensen, Port Commissioner. How do you do way over there? I just would like to ask you a question, if you could help the people here understand what kind of developments have you done? I mean, are they residential? Are they more work designed? What have you? Could you give us a little information about that, please? Could I just add to that a little bit? You didn't mention, or at least I didn't hear, perhaps you did, about water being associated with the developments, or some developments you've done. And the people here, I know, sitting are very concerned about their water and the access that we have to it and the cleanliness of it and all of those things. And can you speak a little bit to what you've done around water-type developments? Well, thank you very much.
Mike?
Pat, this is Mike McCauley. It's
Your mic's not on.
how about now? Can you hear me, Pat? Okay, great. It's great to talk to you again. So there's something that's been top of mind for me over the last 5 years, and it's good to hear your descriptions of the projects you've done in the past. I've proposed a clean tech business park on this waterfront, and I think that that's not out of the realm of the work that you've done in the past. I really appreciate you speaking to the Park West project today. Because I think that kind of gets to the heart of what I think a lot of folks here in Whatcom County would like to see on their waterfront, where there's a strict focus, especially from the port's point of view, on job creation, and definitely not sort of on the retail side, but more on the living wage side of that equation. If you can speak to some maybe not exact specifics, but if you have any, that would be great. But if you can speak to a sort of a tenant mix that you can imagine as you're building this project out, could you describe some of those thoughts? Thank you, Pat.
Pat, Commissioner Robbins again. How soon do you plan to start the project, and how many folks from your company in Ireland do you plan to have over here during the construction of the project? Thank you, Pat.
So Pat, Mike McCauley again. I appreciate you focusing on the granary, first of all. I know that the folks here in this community would like to see that repurposed as soon as possible, and certainly the roof is a bit open, so we're hoping that that gets rolling right away and that there aren't any delays from the city side of it. Could you describe for us what you would see on the first floor of that building, especially as it relates to the Central Street wharf, which is right there on the water? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pat, for taking time out of your evening. It's 11:45 there now, so we'll let you go have one last nightcap and go to bed. So thanks for your time, and we'll be talking to you soon. We look forward to it as well.
Thank you, Pat.
Bye now. So hopefully the accent wasn't too heavy there. It's Pat Doherty comes to town, it'll get worse. So now I'd like to ask Mayor Kelly Linville to come up and say a few words. She's joined us, and the city has been an integral part of this whole waterfront redevelopment. And as you know, that they will be doing the roads, the utilities, and any of the zoning.
Well, it's nice to hear that Irish accent. I kind of missed it. It's very exciting to actually have an actual developer that the port's been working with so that we could start the redevelopment of the waterfront. The city's interest has always been cleanup, access, and jobs. And in my discussions with the port commissioners and Rob, I know that those were the issues that were relayed to Harcourt, and it made a difference in what their design looked like. There was quite a change from when they started to when they finished their conceptual drawings, and a lot of it had to do with fitting into our community and our character and making sure that the jobs aspect and the cleanup aspect and the access aspect were very much emphasized. So I appreciate the change. I think we were all, well, I was a little surprised when I first saw their original drawing because I didn't necessarily think it fit into the character of our downtown. Secondly, of course, the city is very concerned and relieved that the interlocal that we spent 18 months negotiating is reflected or not, I guess not reflected in the agreement with Harcourt. That agreement is between the port and Harcourt, but we do have an interlocal with the port, and we wanted to ensure that all the time we spent negotiating some of those details, that was honored in the agreement, and it was, and I appreciate that. I heard Rob say, well, some things might change, but then that's for another discussion. So that was very nice, and thank you, commissioners, for giving the direction for that to happen. So I think mostly what I'd say is this is going to be a long project. I think I've been involved now for 15 years, and I'm anxious to see something happen before I can't see it. And I also want to give access to the people of Bellingham who have been waiting a very, very long time to reconnect with their waterfront. And I'm glad about the time frame. In case Commissioner McCauley is worried that we're not prepared to do our part, we are. So you don't have to worry about the city holding this up. And with that, I look forward to our continued relationship. We each have a job to do. It's a different job, but I think that I know that we share a vision that this will be the people's waterfront, that there'll be jobs and recreation and parks and places for people to go, and I'm excited and looking forward to that. So the sooner the better. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I did mention that I didn't think the site would look anything like what the drawings are that we're doing today 20 years from now. I don't believe we can predict the future 20 years from now. But I do want to put a caveat on that. If the master plan is to change, it needs to go through public process to do so. It can't just change at the whim of Harcourt, it can't change at the whim of the port, and it can't change at the whim of the city. All three of those entities are going to have to be in agreement to the change, and you, the public, is also going to have to be in agreement to that change. So we have our master plan. Our current plans fall within that master plan, and if there's any changes to that master plan, it will have public process involved with it. So with that, I think I'll conclude my presentation. We'll open it up to questions for the commission.
Just a question for you. If you could explain to the folks about the Western Crossing.
Western Crossing is a joint entity between the port and Western.
You could show it up on the...
Yeah, certainly.
If that's possible.
So Western Crossing is the purple area in the middle of the site, the purple rectangle that says 6 acres next to it. It's kind of surrounded by red on 2 sides and black on the other 2 sides. It's, as it says, it's a 6-acre site in the middle of the waterfront, in the middle of the GP site. It's a joint entity between Western Washington University and the port, and its purpose is to facilitate development on behalf of Western to locate programs down on the waterfront.
Thank you.
Other questions from the commission? Okay, so I'm going to conclude my presentation. I think we're going to be opening it up to public comment again. I just want to point out a couple logistical things about the comment. If you'd like to step up to the podium here, you're welcome to do so. Neil Clement, I believe, has a microphone on the other side of the room there, and he can try and get that to you as well for your public comment. We do ask that you use a microphone so that your comments are reflected on the record and on our YouTube live stream. Thank you.
Can you take questions when you're up there regarding your presentation?
Certainly, I'd be happy to do that.
Before Kelly leaves, Kelly, I'd like to thank you as mayor of this city for the hard work that you've done and the cooperation that you've had with the port and your staff, 2 people in particular, Ted Carlson and Tara Sundin. We thank you very much for all the hard work.
Can I give you a hard time too? You give me a hard time.
So we would like to open the public comment period again. And the next person on the list is, and also before, has Bruce left?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, Steve Swan, thank you once again from Western's side of all the hard work that you've done, and President Shepherd has done in this as well. Thank you. The next public comment is from Joe Wessenhold. Sorry about the last name. Joe? Wiederhold, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm a relatively...
Could you use the mic, please? What's your address?
Hello. My name is Joe Wiederhold, and I live at 1405 Edwards in Bellingham. I just have one comment, which I'm fairly heavily into climate change and sea level rise and that sort of stuff. And I hate to throw cold water on this whole project, cold seawater possibly, but it seems rather unwise to spend a lot of treasure and money and time developing an area that is so low-lying and may be covered in water in 100 years. And that's my comment, and that's it.
Joe, thank you very much for your comment. Our next speaker is Lisa Keenan.
I'm going to pass. Thanks.
Would you like to speak later on at 6 o'clock? No. Thank you very much. George Dyson, did you want to speak before we went down farther, or do you want to hold off till 6?
No, I'll speak now. Just wanted to give Harcourt the chance to talk to us first. So there's a lot to go through in 3 minutes. I wear several hats. One is as an adjacent landowner, 26 years paying my taxes, running a small maritime business. And in that role, and also a moorage customer and so on, I have to write out, flat out question, why is our port selling a 49,500 square foot, structurally sound, 300 pound per square foot floor loading warehouse on a navigable federal waterway until you abandoned it? Why is that being sold to a foreign development company for $200,000? Why isn't it offered on the, I put it on Craigslist for that, see what happens. For a non-water dependent use with guaranteed upzoning and exemption from all impact fees and so on. It's not fair. I'm currently taxed $30 a square foot for property that's under a 35-foot height restriction, is not waterfront. This is repeated patterns. What's happened with, we're subsidizing this at the expense of the local businesses who've sweat blood to survive over these years. And I also have to say, it's sort of a bad sign when you acquire a property. This property was acquired along with liability of several $100 million. That's what we're on the hook for this property. And 10 years later, it takes a year of secret negotiation to sell the prime choice part of that property for $200,000. There's just something's wrong with this picture. I'm willing to listen and see if it gets better. The sale, even at best, it's far below the cost that we're paying for cleanup. And to sort of add insult to injury, the city, we are obligated to pay $25 a square foot to get back whatever parkland is used. And we've not seen any full accounting of real costs. We got a little bit from Rob Fix the other day. But it's just not enough for a deal of this size. And the last thing I would say is just that communities all over the world are sacrificing to consolidate fragmented public waterfront into public assets that, and why are we breaking ours up? If you look at projects like Pike Place Market, Granville Island, they've added immense value to the community by consolidating land into public ownership. We should not be selling it off. And last question, what happened to the marina? The whole deal was the profits from this were supposed to pay for the marina. I see no profit left that's ever going to pay for the marina that we were promised in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, George. Our next speaker would be Liz Morgan.
No, thank you. I was just assigned in the sheet.
No problem. Our next speaker is Bob Burr.
Yes, I too am concerned about the sub-market cost that the deal that Harcourt is getting. Harcourt admits that it's getting a deal, and I would like to know more about the reasoning that went behind giving them such a below-market type thing. I'm also concerned that the city is going to be spending $8 million for a road that they would not have spent if this had been sold to local parties. I am relieved to hear that you all claim to have an emphasis on living wage jobs, and I hope that continues during the long course of this project.
Thank you, Bob. Gary Danklefson from Seattle. Thank you.
I'll speak from the mic. Okay, that's fine. My name's Gary Danklefson. I'm from Seattle, Washington. I've been invited by the local real estate community just to give a quick overview on the economics of the proposal. First of all, I want to commend the commission, the port, the community. We've gone through the master plan. It's very attractive. It's being accretive to the city and to the county. I guess our concerns would be from the overall economic package. The $20 a square foot is on the lower side of the echelon of where market value would be. The opportunity for Harcourt is very attractive from a development standpoint. It gives them an exclusive right to have a very low land basis. Our concern would be for the local real estate community, for the local development community, and with a land basis at $20 a square foot, we're in process of selling a piece of property right now at $100 a square foot. So what you've got is you've got a disproportionate share of what's going to happen from a local developer and what this property could do from an overall economic standpoint. So we would encourage the commissioners to look at the economics. We'd encourage you to look at from creating some type of joint venture opportunity. The city is putting in a lot of the infrastructure. And so what you've got is you've got a lot of infrastructure going in. It's really a joint venture, public-private. And we think that once this first development, first couple of buildings get built, you're going to have appreciation in the overall value of that real estate into the $50 to $100 a square foot, and you don't benefit from that. So our concern is you need to look at the economics and make sure it's viable for today, which it is, but also accretive to the port in the future. Thank you.
1 second, sir. You mentioned you're selling a property at $100 a square foot. Where is that located?
It's in Fairhaven.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Our next comment is from, is it Gordon Assault? Pass. Did you want to speak at 6? No, thank you. Our next speaker would be Barry Wagner.
Yeah, good evening. And I'm going to wear my sunglasses because I have a terrible eye infection. I think it's less distracting this way. I'm Barry Wenger, 2600 H Street, Bellingham. And so I worked on the Bellingham waterfront shoreline issues since 1986. I retired 3 years ago from the Washington State Department of Ecology as their senior environmental planner. That's why I worked on all the cleanup plans and the development plans. One thing I think should be apparent is, we all plan for earthquakes, even though they don't happen very often, but when they do, it's devastating. We also plan for floods and for tsunamis, even though those don't happen very often, but when they do, it's a killer. We now have a new one on the charts that we haven't seen before, and you've read about it in the papers. It's oil by rail. So we have bomb trains going right by this whole facility. So whatever the plan is, you should make this development bomb-proof. And what I mean by that is, when those trains derail, there's no escaping. All you can do is just evacuate. But if you put in buildings right next to the train, the rail line there, that are essentially maybe industrial buildings, something that can actually shield the public area toward the water, I think you've gone a long ways to providing a lot of safety. We never want to see a train wreck here, but they happen all the time. They're predicted by the rail industry to have 10 a year in Washington State alone. 10 a year. We're just seeing the beginning of the trains coming through here. These are 1.25 miles long. They're with Bakken fuel, which is a very light grade crude oil, but it's very much like gasoline, although it burns way hotter. It has solvents in it that are left over from the fracking process. And then it also has nanoparticles of sand that's used in extraction to open up the cracks and keep them open while they extract the oil. What that means is those nanoparticles of sand provide 1 million times the surface area for an explosion to occur on. It's like a catalyst. So when you see the film on these things blowing up, it's not just like a little explosion. It's like a mushroom cloud because it expands faster and faster as it goes up. They burn extremely hot. You can't even put enough foam on them to really deal with it. And so the whole development, we have this major hazard running right along everything we're talking about with lots of people coming down there. So make sure you plan for that. Another quick point is access over the railroad, I think is a really good idea. Just despite what I just said, the area right from about Bay Street or thereabouts, getting more people down to, from downtown over pedestrian bridges. I would like to have seen a bridge actually come down from kind of where Old Town is, the cafe, to the grade crossing is actually all feasible behind the granary. So we have a much more significant connection with the downtown that's, we have now. I know that's expensive. In the meantime, you can have an at-grade crossing where it's planned right now. But that's something that potentially could be added later. So let me check my notes real quick, and I'm probably over time. Oh, last thing. Have a plan B for the log pond area. Because right now, you having a shoreline amendment in to the Department of Ecology. I don't think it's going to get approved, and I've got lots of reasons I can cite for that. And so what that calls for is a use exemption area for within the shoreline area. We're talking just 200 feet from the log ponds, waterways, to allow any kind of upland use in there, which is a terrible precedent statewide, so I don't think it's ever going to go anywhere. Plus, you have lots of other industrial land behind that. Right now, what you have adopted in your master program allows for water-dependent, water-related, and water enjoyment uses within that 200 feet around the log pond. Fine. That's really all you're going to need. But what you're also going to need is you're going to need access to the shipping terminal, which you already have, but also the wharf, which I would call the log pond wharf. And to get access to that, if you're running a truck route right next to the log pond, I don't think that's going to fly. And so you have the University Crossing, or whatever you call it. I think you should be looking at plans of moving that road inland from buildings. It could be on the water side, but rather than having it at grade, put the road in there, then build up a berm on both sides and put a lid on it so people can walk across in the campus. That way, if it got industrial access to that log pond wharf, so that any related water-dependent use of water-related uses can get to it without disrupting the university's property. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Our next speaker is Marion Bedell.
Thank you and good afternoon. Yes, I am Marion Bedell, live in Fairhaven, 23 years or more. I'm a retired civil engineer. I'm going to say a little bit about my background to support my statements to you. I've done lots of projects all over the world in my career, running the County Public Works Department in Kauai, designed and supervised the second largest sanitary sewer system in Brazil during the time there. I've retired. I became a civic environmental activist. And one of the things that I work on as an environmentalist is no toxics, no pollution. I've read your agreement for this Harcourt thing. What was it, 186-page PDF file. Took a little doing. I have experience of many years as a senior team member on all kinds of projects in numerous nations. And I know what an international project agreement would ordinarily look like if it's funded and financed by one of the large development banks, USAID Bank, World Development, et cetera. They do not ignore pollution. They do not ignore toxics. The mill was here. We all know that. It dropped mercury and other very hazardous toxic pollutants in the soils, in the water, and, as a matter of fact, other properties and places in the waterway. And in spots like, we haven't heard about this for a long time, the Wye Road landfill is clearly known, although never officially acknowledged in my experience, as being a dump for the pollutants that were taken from this site. And it's never been cleaned up. Pile dirt on top, say it's done. I disagree. So I'd like to have the Wye Road cleanup added as an activity before anything gets going on this project. There are other hazards. I was going to ask about granting the building permit. I think I did hear that the city will grant the permit for construction. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But what I would say is do not grant a building permit, whether it's your work as the Port Commission or the City of Bellingham's work or the county or whoever. Do not grant the building permit for the on top of the stuff until the entire site is cleaned up, inspected, and improved by the proper health agencies and declared as safe. Have I made myself clear? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Marion. That concludes anyone who has signed up. Is there anyone who wants to speak that has not signed up? This is your opportunity. Yes, sir. Come to the mic and introduce yourself, if you will.
Hello, everyone, and commissioners. Thanks for all the hard work that's gone into this. It's cool to see a dialogue and a developer involved. I come from the...
We'd like to know your name for the record.
Adrian Eisinger. I live 899 Piper Road. I'm an alumni of the Vehicle Research Institute. I went to Western.
Thank you, Adrian.
So I come from that background, and I see a lot of potential for potentially the board mill, which you can actually see there is the rectangular building in the Western Crossing section. Does this sound okay? It's kind of buzzing.
Back up just a little bit, maybe.
Buzzing me a little bit. It's the 40th anniversary of the VRI this year. So there's a lot of alumni of that program. Dr. Michael Seal lives down on Chuckanut. 500 people came to his retirement dinner. He said he would be available to speak at a conference or something of that nature. And I think that if we had some specific projects that were of interest to the community, we would have a really big supportive base from the alumni of the Vehicle Research Institute only. And I think that would be a lot of fun. Now, the cleanup issue, I think we have a lot of potential here with the likes of Paul Stamets and some others who have piloted biological remediation technologies that show promise for crude oil and even heavy metals contamination. I think to explore something along those lines as an option would be potentially of incredible value as an exportable commodity that Bellingham could produce for the world. There's contaminated sites like this all over the world, and if we could pilot technologies that actually cleaned up these contaminants instead of covered them up or removed them and moved them somewhere else, but actually cleaned them up, removed them from the soil, which is doable, and actually potentially economically a lot cheaper than some of the alternatives, proven technologies. I think the potential is there with the brilliant people at Western, the brilliant community that we have here, and this opportunity of need that we have to clean up this site and do some cool projects. Green tech jobs is a common thing that we hear, really common, it's a common thing that people want. And I think with what I've just outlaid and other opportunities, we could see those readily appear on our waterfront and in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Is there anybody else who would like to speak that hasn't had an opportunity? Yes, to the podium, please.
Okay, thank you. Dorothy Dale. I live at the Leopold Hotel. I used to live out on Chuckanut Drive, and when in the early days of this whole development of the waterfront, our community organization invited a faculty member from Western. I believe he was in geology, was his specialty, and I keep remembering his advice at that time. This would have been in the 90s. He said, this whole area has been built up on fill. And his advice was nothing should ever be put on that land, because if we do have a severe earthquake, which is always being predicted, it'll simply turn to jelly. those are his words, and a lot of cleanup and caution needs to be taken care of before any building happens in this area.
Dorothy, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Yes, in the back.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Barg. I live at 2315 Eldridge Avenue.
Scott, what was your last name?
Barg, B-A-R-G.
Thank you.
I'm curious, is there a representative from Harcourt here today? No. I guess that's my question. I'm concerned that with this, if this is such a monumental occasion and a big deal for Harcourt, and they are going to be a permanent part of our community here for the next 20-odd years, why is there no one here from that organization? I'm concerned about that. It doesn't bode well to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I will add, Scott, that the commissioners and a lot of the staff met with 6 folks from Harcourt that came out here last summer and went over the property and spoke with them. And there's some folks who've done some work. John Reed, is John still here? Did he leave? He just left. John Reed did some work for Harcourt, but thank you for your comments as well. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a comment? Yes, sir.
Robin Dexter, 3726 Broad Street. I just would like, this is my first experience hearing about this agreement, and I am trying to get my head around the comparison with Barclay Village, and if it's going to take 20 years, now I've lived here all my life, all my adult life, and I've worked on the waterfront, and it's very difficult to drive by that every day, the mill site. And my suggestion to you, if the development of this property is going to go as slowly as you say it is, my request to you is take the fences down. Take them down tomorrow. And if you're afraid of the liability that you'll accrue on that account, then get an insurance policy. But you're going to ask all of us that live in the city to pay for this, the infrastructure on this property. We're going to absorb a huge development cost just for the infrastructure. And I want to start walking on that waterfront. And you can trust me not to hurt myself. So that's my message to you. Do it tomorrow, right? Buy an insurance policy, and I promise not to stand in front of a train or fall in the water.
Thank you for your comments, Robin. Our lawyer just lost what little hair he has left.
In the back.
Well, yes, come forward, please.
Mike?
Oh, you have a mic there?
Well, he's this.
Oh, I could have spoken. That would have been easier. Sorry.
I'll let the lady go first.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I even cut in front of somebody. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Charles Law. I'm from Bellingham. My concern is the recession. I'm Charles Law, and I'm from Bellingham.
What was your last name?
Law, L-A-W? Law. Bellingham, Washington. My concern is your recession numbers, the 24 to 36. I'm concerned those numbers could be concurrent. What would be the proposal behind that? And also, I think we should also look at the recession with the Canadian dollar. I think we have to look at that being a neighbor of the Vancouver area.
Mr. Law, are you referring to the appraisal when you say recession
I'm
numbers?
referring to the recession numbers. The 24 months, the 36 months.
The delays.
The delays. Okay. Due to market conditions.
Delays, yes, thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. Yes.
My name is Gaithia Weiss. I live here.
I'm sorry.
Gaithia Weiss.
Thank you.
And I live here in Bellingham, and I just wanted to kind of give a final summation comment. I think you've heard a lot of things today. You've heard them before. We hope that you're listening. Climate change, soil liquefaction, exploding oil trains. I think the first thing to start with would be to find out, get your attorney to check with the insurance company to see what it would take to have people freely walking on that site. I think it is a liability issue now. I think it's a liability issue to come. I think Marion is quite right that you would never, ever want to have people down there and then have to be remediating right next to where they are. And I think that there are a lot of very open-ended questions completely unresolved as to exactly how that remediation is going to effectively take place. And so while Robin wants to rush things and go for a stroll, I think there's work to do, and the work should come before the building or the planning to build. And I think that's why you had to scrounge the world to find somebody to take that contract on, and you did it at a rate which clearly indicates that this is a risky proposition. Why did they take why couldn't you charge them 100 instead of 20? I mean, I think there are some serious concerns here that this town has sort of buried. For years, people lived with the idea that living next to a paper mill was okay because it was the smell of money. And that went away. And I think that there's still sort of a heads in the sand kind of attitudes toward facing up to what's really there and what really has to be done to do it. And so I don't think any of this should proceed until we figure out what it does it take to simply walk there, because that would be a good start. That would enhance the downtown. I think, if we can get from there to some industrial use in careful ways, I think that would be excellent. But this is not a place where you're going to raise families. This is just not a good site for that. And it just isn't, and never will be. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment at this time that has not signed up? Yes.
I'm Hugh Beatty, and I live in Bellingham.
Hold on, Hugh. Let us get a mic to you, please.
Hugh Beatty, I live in Bellingham. I was hoping that the ASB would be addressed a little bit by Harcourt. It doesn't seem like it's going to be addressed, but it seems like it's a valuable thing to have a water treatment area there that we have, and I hope you don't ruin it for some kind of a yacht club idea that some of you have been pushing over the years. Also, if that area was built above and still using for water treatment underneath, you could put this humongous soccer field there that would look out over the bay. It would be pretty cool. And people would come from all over there. You'd have something world class.
Thank you, Hugh. Someone behind you, sir, and then you. Yes, if you could come to the mic, please, or stand up.
Dave Ebenall. Harcourt sounds like a real qualified, a great developer. Sounds like they're going to do a really good job for the city and the port. What I'm concerned with is the economics of the transaction. $200,000 for the granary on the Whatcom Waterway just simply doesn't pass the smell test. We're buying and selling real estate right now for double $20 a foot, for 40, 50, 60 bucks a foot or more. And I have nothing against Harcourt. They sound really qualified. They sound like they've got a great track record, have done a lot of real positive things, and sound like the right developer for the site. But to be tied in with $20 a foot for the next 20 years, it's not good for the real estate community. It's not good for developers. And I mean, I've heard things like, well, there's 3% bump per year. Well, gosh, over 10 years, that's $5. It's peanuts. I've heard, well, they're responsible for the environmental. Well, that's really not true. The port is responsible for the environmental, and sure, there may be some residual pipes in the ground, but in the scheme of things, it's pennies. It's absolute pennies. But mostly, what skin do they have in the game? Usually, I've never seen a contract like this that without serious non-refundable money upfront paid. And you know, I'm surprised that this deal is in front of the public, frankly. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, sir. In the front row, can you get a mic here, please?
Bob Hughes of Bellingham, born and raised here 86 years ago. And when I was a boy and through my life, the waterway I'm looking at was the heart of Bellingham. What are we going to do with that waterfront? I haven't heard a thing about what's going to use for. There's no discussion of it. It's just sitting there, a nice view, but what's it going to be used for? Are we going to put commercial boats on it? Is it going to be used for charter boats or what? I like to see something used the way it used to be used in the old days.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? This is your chance to make a comment on our waterfront development. No one else? Would we like to recess now until 6 o'clock? And we'd like to recess to a executive session so that the three commissioners can discuss some of the things that we've heard, and it'll only be about Harcourt, and we'll be back here or the waterfront development, and we'll be back here at 6 o'clock. There can be more public comment and the presentation for those who were working today and couldn't get here this afternoon. We'll have a similar presentation this evening.
Commissioners, I understand you're going to recess to executive session to discuss the real estate transaction that's before you.
Yes.
And you'll be in executive session reconvening at 6 o'clock p.m. in the public session.
Correct.
And of course, no actions taken in the executive session. That has to wait public.
Correct.
Decision and discussion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I make a quick comment before everybody leaves? There have been several folks that have shown interest. I'm sure there may be more in the land value. If you'd like to take a look at a hard copy of the appraisal, I have one right here. It's already open to the same those pages. So if you want to take a look at that, we've got an appraisal from 2014 on this, so it might help answer some further questions.
Thank you, Mike. We're adjourned. The public meeting. Well, first, I'll close the executive session and reconvene the special public meeting on the waterfront development. And we'll start out. We have down here that we're going to do the presentation first, and then the public comment. Is that the order we'd like to do it in?
Sure.
For those that were here earlier, I apologize. It's the exact same presentation, but we wanted to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to hear it for those that couldn't make it earlier today. So here's a brief timeline of where we've come from when the port acquired the property in 2005. Prior to the port acquiring the property, there was a waterfront futures group formed that was consisted of members of the public. After the port bought the property in 2005, the waterfront advisory group was formed. Also a very public entity. The port purchased the property. We studied a lot of alternatives for the property. A full SEPA review was done. Draft plans and regulations were put into place. In December of 2013, the City Council and the Port Commission approved a master plan for the site that included zoning changes. And in June of 2013, the port put an RFP out, a request for proposals for 10 acres of the site. We had 4 respondents to that we considered master development proposals, and we had 3 respondents that we considered to be project-specific proposals. In September of 2013, a company called Harcourt was selected out of the 4 master developer proposals. And then in March of 2014, the port entered into an exclusive negotiating agreement, sometimes referred to as the ENA, and that was entered into March 4th of 2014. About a month or 2 after that, we agreed on a term sheet. All of this was a very public process, and all of this was done in open public meetings. The term sheet was published on the port's website after it was agreed to. And that term sheet that we agreed to, and I think it was end of April, early May of 2014, is the basis for the master development agreement that you're considering today. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. And with that, I'll move on to the next slide. Here's a map of the site. The area up at the top in the purple is what we call our marine trades area. It is marine trades. It will always be marine trades. And down the bottom of the, in the orange, is the Cornwall Beach area. In 2005, the port owned about 51% of the Cornwall Beach area, and the city owned 49%. The area was determined best use to be a park, and the port, while we have a couple of parks, and we're very proud of our parks, it's not our core line of business. It's not something we probably do well, and the city does do parks well. And the city owned a bunch of land up in the purple area, the marine trades areas. That is something the port does well. So we got together with the city and decided that a straight across swap, land for land, with no money being exchanged, just made sense. It gave the port all the area in the marine trades area, and it gave the city 100% ownership in the area that would become a park. Looking at the green and the yellow areas, that's our shipping terminal and our log pond area. Those are being reserved for light industrial activity. The green area, the shipping terminal, is an area that's very underutilized. It has the potential to create and produce a lot of jobs on the site. However, we've always been very constrained by the space of the shipping terminal. It just doesn't have enough acreage associated with it. So our thinking is that if we combine that with the log pond area, and we put those 2 areas together, that we have enough critical mass to attract an industrial user. The blue area there is what we're going to focus on today. It's the downtown waterfront area, and it's zoned for a commercial mixed use. The blue area is 37 acres. The area we're talking about for the MDA is not the full 37 acres. It is only 18.8 of the 37. Another 6 acres goes to Western Crossing, and then the rest of the site is uncommitted at this time. One of the things that has been stressed in the earlier meeting today, and was stressed by Harcourt when they're out visiting the site, and has been stressed by both the city and the port, is that the connections between this downtown waterfront area and the central business district are critical. The more connections, the better. We're not trying to have 2 separate areas, 2 separate downtowns. We would like it to be one seamless downtown, one seamless central business district that extends from our current downtown all the way to our waterfront. So I talked earlier about the request for proposals that came out in June of 2013, the fact that we got 4 master development proposals. We had an evaluation committee that consisted of members of the port, the city, Western Washington University, the county, and a consultant to the port called Heartland, not to be confused with Harcourt. The unanimous recommendation of that committee was to select Harcourt to develop the property. They had the experience in doing brownfield developments. They had the access to international capital, and they had the right ideas that fit within our master plan. Go back to that slide for just a second here. I already talked about it, sorry. Okay. So Harcourt's plan is largely consistent with the master plan. You're looking at a drawing here that shows a couple of different areas on it. I'm going to point out the Western Crossing piece here. The Western Crossing piece is the area I'm outlining in red. It's 6 acres. The slide I'm going to show you later shows the exact 18.8 acres that Harcourt will be developing. Although Harcourt's plan is largely consistent with the master development plan approved by the city and the port, we do expect over time there will be changes to it. We suspect that someone will want to amend those plans, and there are provisions for doing that. However, any of those changes require a rigorous public process. They can't be done by the city without public process, they can't be done by the port without public process, and they certainly can't be done by Harcourt without public process. So while I suspect that 20 years from now, this is not what this is going to look like, I also know that there will be a very good chance for public involvement in how that process changes. But currently, as it stands, this is Harcourt's vision. It fits within the master plan. It fits within the zoning of the site. And I think that's the plan you'll see in place for a good majority of the initial development area. So here's an outline of what Harcourt will be buying over time. It's outlined in the blue up there, and then you'll see the blue rectangle with the red outline is Western Crossing, but the heavy blue and the cross-hatching is the area being considered today in the Master Development Agreement. Harcourt has established an entity in Washington called Harcourt Bellingham, LLC. It's a single-purpose entity for the sole purpose of developing this property. One of the things that appealed to us about Harcourt was their development experience, particularly the experience of a couple individuals in that company, Pat Power and Pat Doherty. Both of them had extensive experience developing brownfield sites in a very successful manner. So one of the things we put into this agreement is a key man provision where they must remain involved in the early stages of the agreement. The next slide I'm going to show you is a schedule that Harcourt needs to meet. It's a default schedule, meaning that if they don't meet those time frames, then they're in default under the agreement. It's not necessarily the schedule that we expect the development to take place at. If it doesn't take place at that schedule, again, they're in default, which means that they have to develop faster than the schedule I'm going to show you. Harcourt plans to have the granary building done by 2019. They'll have a second building completed by 2021. They'll have a third building completed by 2024. 500,000 square feet by 2029 and followed up by 1 million square feet by 2034. So by way of comparison, in case you're wondering how much 500,000 square feet is, we believe the Barclay development is about 750,000 square feet and has been developed over about a 20-year time frame. The Bellwether Peninsula is about 250,000 square feet, and it's been developed over about 30 years. So that gives you an idea of what we can expect the pace of development to look like down on the Georgia Pacific site. There are provisions for some delays. Market condition delays specifically would allow Harcourt another recession, such as 2008 or 2009, would allow Harcourt another 24 months over and above these time frames. And then there's also conditions for delay for port cleanup or for city installed infrastructure if those aren't done in the timely manner that they're expected to be done. The 24-month market condition delay is not applicable to the first two projects. That's the granary building and the second building that needs to be completed by 2021. They can't delay those. They have to follow this schedule. The market condition delays don't come into effect until the third building. The agreement calls for Harcourt to purchase the land or lease the land at a rate of about $20 per square foot, which increases about 3% per year. There's also an option to lease the property, and they will pay us $200,000 a year for the granary building. I'm sorry, $200,000 for the purchase of the granary building, not a year, just $200,000 flat out purchase for the granary building. How we arrived at that price? We had a couple appraisals done. We took into consideration the fact that the city will be installing roads and utilities. We took into consideration this will be a difficult site to build on because of brownfield conditions, because of seismic considerations, and the fact that there's a lot of underground industrial infrastructure. And then we also considered, as equally, if not more so, to price, was the value of putting this land back to work. One of the reasons the port acquired the land was to put the site back to work, to get jobs on the site and to get put it back into the tax base. Some of the performance requirements you heard about the schedule. It's the maximum time, but the market will actually dictate the pace of development. Again, I talked about the Bellwether and the Barclay developments. We expect that the market will dictate the pace of development, not a contract. Ensuring a quality development, the port will have to approve each parcel of land bought by Harcourt and the project they're going to put on it prior to them purchasing the land. The city has to approve do any permitting for the project. And there's design standards and development regulations in place. We do have a public-private partnership on this site. Obviously, the port's responsibility is to do any environmental cleanup. The city's responsibility is to install utilities, the arterial streets, and the parks. Harcourt's responsibility will be to install buildings, interior roads that are non-arterial, and any open space that are not parks. And then Western Crossing is considered a critical element down there, kind of the anchor tenant, if you will. And they're 6 acres, and how that developments will be part of this public-private partnership. And when I use the term public-private partnership, that has a real legal meaning, and that it's not applicable here, but I think it's a good description of what we're doing. While we don't fit the legal definition of a public-private partnership, and our master development agreement is in no way considered a public-private partnership, it is a good description because we do have 3 public entities, the Washington University, the city, and the port, working with a private partner. And that'll conclude my development. I'll leave you with my presentation. I'll leave you with a couple next steps here. We're going to be open up for some public comment. Neil, over there in the blue shirt, has a microphone. If you'd like to make a public comment from the microphone there, you're also welcome to step up to the podium here to make your public comments. We expect the commission will take action on the agreement sometime later this evening. And then we'll start our preparation on the site. You're going to see a lot of activity happening down the Georgia Pacific site over the next several months. We have a permit to start the work on the Whatcom Waterway. That project is going out for bid. It's a $29 million project, and that's going to mobilize a lot of equipment down on the site. Then the Phase 1 infrastructure will start to be installed by the city in 2016 and 2017, and then the building construction will begin. And then, unless the commissioners have any questions, that concludes my presentation.
Do you have any questions, Mike?
No, Rob, thanks for going through that again for this evening.
Any questions, Jim?
Rob, could you perhaps mention a few of the projects that they have done in Ireland and other places?
Sure.
Because they're not here to say, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great, Jim. That's a really good idea, because earlier today we did have Harcourt on the phone, and they did talk about some of the projects they did. I was fortunate enough to get to go over there and see some of their projects. And I can tell you the Park West project is a little over 4 million square feet development, very similar to what we want to do on the Georgia Pacific site. And the Park West project is in Dublin. You can Google it and take a peek at it if you'd like. It's a mixed-use project, meaning that it's got some industrial on it. It's got some office on it. It's got a hotel, some residential, and some retail. It's very similar to what we'd like to do on our site here. Harcourt has also developed the Titanic Quarter. The Titanic Quarter is in Belfast, another mixed-use site, and I noticed that the famed architect from the Titanic Quarter is in the room right now. Maybe he'd like to raise his hand and say hi to Mr. John Reed. He's largely responsible for developing just the Titanic Quarter in Belfast. Very successful development of Harcourt's. They've also done some development work in Liverpool, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. I'm just giving a couple examples. They have a hotel in Liverpool called the Titanic Hotel, and they're currently underway in developing a very large apartment complex in that same area.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Yep. Before we start the public comment, John Reed is in the audience. John, is there anything, I'm going to put you on the spot. We're going to be listening to a lot of Irish people talking here in the future. Is there anything you wanted to step up and say? There's a mic right there for you, John.
You might want to get an interpreter.
Can you tell us something? You probably have the most experience of working with Harcourt of anyone in the room. Is there anything you wanted to add? I just wanted to give you that opportunity.
I know that the owner of Harcourt Developments, Pat Doherty, is very...
That mic isn't working yet. Just a second. It's on? Okay, go ahead.
I know that the owner of Harcourt Developments, Pat Doherty, is very excited about this project, even from the moment he saw it on Google, even before he got here. And As I know him, I don't regard him as a developer. I regard him as an entrepreneur. He's like no one I've ever met. He has vision, he has ideas, he has the courage to go ahead with things. He gets things done. He's a very exciting man to work with. And I think he views Bellingham as probably the next most exciting project in his portfolio. I'm very glad to have brought him here, and I look forward to this going ahead.
Thank you very much. So we'll start now with the public comment period. Please limit your remarks tonight to the waterfront development if you could. If you're here for a public comment on something other than the waterfront development, we meet next Tuesday, and you're welcome to come speak on any issue at that time. Our first speaker is Doug Carlberg. You can either take the mic there, Doug, or step up to the podium if you'd like.
The lights are better on the podium.
There you go.
My name is Doug Carlberg. I live in Linden, and I guess this is the first time that since the waterfront was proposed to be cleaned up and the port took over the cleanup from Georgia Pacific, that we've had a chance as the public over 10 years to stop and reflect on this project. Because up till now, we know we got bills coming in, $54 million worth of bills to clean up. This is the first time we've actually got cash flow coming the other way. And so I'm going to get a little bit broader, but if you stick with me, I'll make it quick. 10 years ago, there was an agreement signed at Bellingham Airport with 14 dignitaries from 14 governmental agencies and tribes. And it was a big celebration. And within a short amount of time, the port threatened to sue and took over the project. Now, the main reason they did that was they wanted the marina, they wanted the lagoon. And basically, the port told us that they were going to do a better job than Georgia Pacific and that they could recover the costs to the public, which is substantial and still growing. It's a very large number, probably the largest in the history of Whatcom County as far as public expenditures for a single project, especially what ultimately is going to be a real estate development project, not just providing fire trucks and police, the traditional governmental responsibilities. So I've taken a hard look at this, and I'll state it up front. I think you should sign it, but I don't think it's a flaming good deal for the public, and I don't think that this was what was envisioned 10 years ago when the port brought this to us. I think it's obvious that some things have changed. I'm a stickler for arithmetic, and I'll point out something right from the start, is that you put up there 1 million square feet in 20 years, and then said the Bellwether took 30 years, which is 10,000 square feet a year. Barclay Village, 15,000 square feet a year. If you divide 1 million square feet by 10,000 or 15,000 on an annual basis, you get somewhere between 65 and 100 years, and yet you've got 20 years up on the board. And the reason why this is important is it's pointed out in your own appraisal. You had 2 appraisals done. One appraiser said very succinctly, you cannot develop this property to the density that it's zoned to without collapsing the real estate market. The numbers say it. The appraiser says it. They calculated it. And that's one of the reasons why the port's having a hard time getting some giant number for this property. There's not that demand. The demand's not there. This is a big development in a small city, and the experts have said so succinctly. And I think that, number one, I want you guys to get that. You need more demand here. That's the problem with making this waterfront pencil out. If I read the port's books correctly, we got another $100 million in cleanup to go, and that's just on the port side. The city's got God knows how much, 50 million? Those are huge numbers, and the value of the land is the key to it. If you can't sell that land, you pay back the public, or even on the Harcourt deal, you're going to finance it. So, and I got nothing against Harcourt, but I got something for the public. Don't want to wait 27 years to get our money back because the bills for the cleanup are coming in today. If you give me 60 seconds, I'll finish up. You need to focus on demand, and there are people that know how to create demand. We had one working for the Public Development Agency up here. He took 1,000 acres out in the middle of farmland. He knew how to create demand. He'd go find a company, get them to move to town, then he'd build them a building. We need to create demand. And it's just like if I had a brain tumor. I don't want to hire a knee surgeon. I don't want to hire somebody just out of med school. I don't want to hire a surgeon who doesn't have a very good record. I want the best. You need demand. And I would take a hard look at this Marina Lagoon situation and take a look at whether the $40 million to clean it up and 20,000 truckloads of soup to come out of there is truly more valuable to the public than filling it in and trying to get a world-class manufacturer in there, because I don't know where you can get 50 acres on the waterfront in Puget Sound that's not on the peninsula, but that's a pretty rare site. Upzoning land normally increases value. That's your quote in the newspaper, and you're absolutely correct. But the value of something is between supply and demand. If you increase too much mixed use and there's not enough demand, that price will fall. If you shrink the industrial base area land and there's a lot of demand for it, that price will raise. You got to keep the balance in mind. Everybody thought upzoning it would create a lot of value, but really we've created more upzoned land than we can possibly sell right now. The Port of Bellingham is sitting on a huge amount of unsold real estate and not much market for it. We need the demand. And I hope you guys will work on that so that the next time we come in this room, the values are higher, the paybacks are quicker, and we don't need to subsidize the sale. The impact fees are a huge portion of this value of this land. It doesn't show up much. And the granary buildings basically is a gift to the developer. I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. But it's not an indication of a very strong market. And we need a strong market to get the taxpayers' money back. Nothing against Harcourt, but we want our money back, and if we can make some money, that's great too, because the public taxpayers out a ton of dough right now and more to come. So thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Doug. Can't read the first name, last name, Jacobson?
That's Carol.
Is it Carol?
Yep. Good reading. Good evening. My name's Carol Jacobson and I live in Bellingham. The development plan strived for high standards of monitoring, enforcement and transparency. Now is the time, at last, for transparency, as the public input deserves consideration and this has become a check-the-box activity. For your public to stay informed, please develop regular reports that will explain clearly the economic benefits to local taxpayers, collectively your biggest investor, for each and every development. We've waited many years for any information. The Waterfront Development Agreement reveals the port has made some serious accommodations within a very fluid state of possibilities. Mystery Building 2 is to be sold for $20 a square foot, a fitting price for a future warehouse. But as yet, this public agency has not informed the public of this plot's future use. Has a request for a proposal gone out? The granary was saved from demolition by many people in the town. Empty and neglected for too many years, the granary stood uncontaminated. Its 0.5-acre lot next to a brownfield is to be sold for a giveaway price, as you all well know. It is less than the cost of any house in Bellingham. The local taxpayer will pay much more for the infrastructure than the developer for his 18.8 acres. Why this unusual situation, wherein the developer pays nothing for infrastructure, the cost is totally paid by the Bellingham taxpayer, and strangely, the price of land does not reflect the price of the infrastructure. A just partial payment to Bellingham should be locals get priority in hiring. Hire first local specialists and consultants, as well as local architects, local building contractors, local suppliers, and laborers. Honor the goal in the development plans that all laborers receive Washington prevailing wages and permit local building apprenticeships. To avoid speculation, take away the complexity of site changes and develop the property after the whole site is cleaned up. The northern non-polluted sites of the granary in Building 2 would not have to be sold at actual brownfield prices or at low rates because they are next to a brownfield. but instead is sites next to a cleaned brownfield with completed infrastructure. This is then their true value and not for their hoped speculative value. The most puzzling problem of all, I'm sorry, Harcourt, is why the portists are coming to your siren song. Particularly, it's based on an unknown economy. Why would you compete with our downtown business, whether there's roads or not, when a working waterfront coalition exists with local businesses eager to move forward with both established and modern industries? Our port is a land-filled brownfield with a railway track running through it. In spite of that, we have an economically vital fishing industry, a viable working waterfront, and a local Indian tribe who can still earn a livelihood fishing in their ancestral fishing grounds. We also have a population that saved an old building, will invest in the development's infrastructure, and like any taxpayer investor, wants the old Georgia Pacific site cleaned up and ready to produce so as to improve the local economy through good jobs. For that investment, we expect in return nothing more than living wage jobs and access to a modern, non-contaminated working waterfront. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Our next speaker would be Betsy Pernotto.
Good evening. My name is Betsy Pernotto. I live in Bellingham also. And I'd like to start by thanking you for holding an evening session. It isn't possible for many people who are working to come to the afternoon sessions. But I'm a little bit puzzled even why you bothered to do so, because this process seems to already have been decided. The Master Development Agreement was just published 2 weeks ago, and so the public had 2 weeks to look at a nearly 200-page document. And you have said you plan to sign it tonight. It doesn't feel like a public hearing should be held the same night you plan to sign a development. The public should have a lot more time to weigh in on this. I have several problems with this agreement. One of them is that the port is supposed to be a major driver for economic development in Whatcom County. And yet the kind of development that Harcourt is proposing is a total unknown. There's nothing in the Master Development Agreement about the kinds of businesses that will be created here. There's no requirements for living wage jobs. There's no requirements for apprenticeship set aside so that workers can learn new trades and make living wages. And what it feels like is that we are going to end up with cannibalizing the downtown and creating coffee shops and boutiques for tourists instead of living wage jobs for local residents. Another problem that I have with this is that is the $200,000 that the Harcourt is getting the granary from. And I know Rob Fix presented the information on the way this land was evaluated, but you can't buy a house in Bellingham for $200,000. This is going to be the gateway to the waterfront. Why are we providing corporate welfare to an Irish corporation and giving away prime waterfront area in Bellingham? I urge you to vote no on this agreement.
Thank you, Betsy. Our next speaker would be Matt Patkus.
Hi, Matt Pascas, 1151 Old Marine Drive. Yeah, I just had a concern about the risk and negotiation. You know, I had a slip up at Samiamu, and when the port built the marina next door, the marina ended up going out of, I wouldn't say going out of business, but it had financial problems. And so I hope we take those same considerations with the commercial real estate that's already in place. Just because it may face that same issue where the port is undercutting maybe real estate prices that are upstream and for businesses that have been in Bellingham a little bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Our next speaker would be, is it Keith DeMello? D'Angelo, I'm sorry.
Good evening. I don't remember which one of the commissioners that still remains was here when we accepted the liabilities left by Georgia Pacific. Well, thank you very much. I see you're still here. Now you're trying to pull the same sort of a deal with Harcourt. Leave the liabilities with the public and give the benefits to somebody else. I don't approve. I urge you not to approve. In fact, if you do this time, I think we'll sue. It's not a good deal. We can all see that. What we can all see is that you're desperate for some kind of a deal. And that does not give you license to cause an indebtedness for the public. I think most of the speakers that have spoken so far have voiced that opinion. We had one maybe, and the others were, hey, this isn't a good deal. So I echo the statement made earlier of the public comment period. With this many years to get a proposal together and the public being presented with the deal 2 weeks ago, you expect us to have 3 minutes worth of comment on that in 2 20-minute sessions? Does that seem reasonable? Gentlemen, lady? I don't think so. Not for this size of a project, this size of a deal. It's rather farcical. I think in summary, what I want to say is that you should not approve this agreement without additional time for community input and thoughtful consideration. I think you should renegotiate the contract, and I think that you need to give us more time to consider how to instruct you as servants of the public how to best represent us in this deal. I'm not willing to be left with another deal like we got left with when you negotiated the Georgia Pacific transfer. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Our next speaker is Tip Johnson.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's my opinion that this project has gone a little bit off the rails, but then I think the port sort of took it off the rails when they commenced the review with the marina in the no action plan and kept the public from commenting on that. I think they derailed it further when they adopted the new framework and assumptions, expanding the project to include the marina without reopening the scoping for comments. I think they made it impossible to get it back on track when they more or less defrauded the public into believing there was a public process for our waterfront futures. Rob points out that we had two very public, the advisory group and the waterfront futures group, but none of the things that they recommended are here, none of them. So I think a lot of people are pretty disappointed in that. I think the port's priority for putting the land back to work it's a little weak, it's facile, it's a farce. In fact, if you wanted to put it back to work, why would you wreck the water treatment facility that receives the industrial water supply? Why would you decommission the waterway? In doing so, you're foreclosing on living wage jobs that could put your constituency back to work. You're the people that vote for you and pay the taxes for you. They could be back to work and the land back to work. I bet folks would rather have the jobs, but besides putting 6 million square feet of mixed-use development with parking to work here next to downtown could do what Bellis Fair did to downtown, except many times worse, and that could cost us a lot of jobs. Putting the land back on the tax rolls at any cost is not sensible. It isn't sensible either, in my opinion, to bust up a consolidated public waterfront. We should preserve and improve that for future generations. A solid public waterfront could do a lot more for this town than a few more offices and condominiums. In fact, I believe if you did the metrics, if you just put down grass and volleyball courts and some dog walking areas and maybe a soccer field with a minimum of investment, capital investment, that site would do more to benefit more people and more businesses in this town and county than the development that's being proposed. I don't think you should sell it at a fraction of its present value when its future value could inure to the community. I don't think you should sign a deal that sells the store, a deal with no deed of trust. no security, no responsibility for legal fees, no environmental responsibility, no down payment, and artificially low interest. I'm not sure you can even sign a deal that usurps the city's police power of zoning. Harcourt can't veto that. Anyway, the deal doesn't pass the smell test. Someone's benefiting, and it wouldn't be happening if someone wasn't, but it's clearly not the tax-paying citizens of the Port of Bellingham. Obviously, Harcourt has to benefit, or they'd have no incentive to do it. And I'm not opposed to something happening here. It just, this exclusive favoritism smacks of something sour. I think we need to redouble our efforts to expand the commission in hopes of better policy and better public outcomes. And I think I will continue to seek an investigation of how this process unfolded and why it's come to what it has. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tip. I don't have anyone else signed up for public comment at this time. Is there anyone who came in late or who has decided they want to make a public comment? Please raise your hand or come to the podium if you would. Come to the podium.
Hi, my name is Karen Weil. I live right outside Bellingham in Whatcom County. I have to tell you guys, I have felt for a long time that the port basically ignores the public, and the way this particular development project, the way this contract has come up, to me is just in one piece with all the other stuff that's happened around the port since we moved here 12 years ago. I didn't see any public notice about this development, or this contract, I mean, being put out there. I had signed up about a year ago at a hearing in this room for notices around this kind of stuff. I'm very interested in the waterfront. Did not receive a thing from anybody at the port. The only reason why I know about it was because someone in an organization I belong to put out an email yesterday. So I've had basically one day to look at a 195-page document. I did not have time to even barely glance at it. And the fact that it's been announced that it's going to be inked the same day as the public comment period, or as the public comment is being allowed, it takes away any appearance of fairness. It makes it look like you guys have already made up your mind and you're just sitting here listening to us because, like somebody else said, it's a box you have to check. It's not something where you actually have to consider our opinions. You just have to check off the box that you did it. But you know, you're going to go ahead and sign it anyway. It doesn't matter what we say. Because there's certainly no way that you have time to take into account anything we've said and go back to Harcourt and say, oh, look, we want to change the contract back based on this public input, you know, if you're going to be inking it tonight. I just, I mean, everybody knows that's not the way business works. I really want to comment or just add to what Tip said about turning parts of this into parkway and you know, soccer fields or whatever. There has been enormous strides made in being able to clean up sites using natural materials, and we're not even considering that. We're just, you know, just like with the Cornwall Park, where they tried to beat, you guys tried to beat the deadline, where the deadline was going to be that on January 1st of the next year, you couldn't put the amount of dioxin onto that site that you were putting on there, as long as if you'd waited until January 1st. So 6 months before that, you approved a deal where you were going to dig up the dioxin that's at the bottom of the marina and dump it on the park in Cornwall Park. We call it now Double Dioxin Park. and then you're going to just put a plastic sheet over it, and then you're going to let kids play on it. And I asked the Parks and Rec gentleman, I think his name is Mr. King, what about trees? Are you going to put trees on there? And he said, no, because that would penetrate the plastic sheeting. So if we did put any trees on there, they'd be in big buckets. And I'm like, it's not taking care, not taking any notice of the most recent environmental science about how to get this stuff cleaned up. It's just saying, let's just take the quickest and cheapest way. And that's what you did with Cornwall Park, and now it feels like that's what you're doing here with this contract with Harcourt. I have nothing against Harcourt. I'm sure they're very nice people. But I don't, I just, the giveaway of the granary, $20 per square foot. Somebody said you can't buy a house for $200,000. Well, we bought our house for about $200,000, but it's way in this little corner. It's about half the amount of land. It's got a mobile home on it, basically. And you guys are giving away what's supposed to become the heart of Bellingham and the most, commercially viable land for less money than we paid. I'm like, anyway, somebody said something about living wage jobs. Takes $17 an hour just to even make it in this town. You're not going to make it with the kinds, if you start messing around with the zoning like you want to do with the log pond. Okay, thank you. At the very least, give us more time to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment?
There are things I would like to say that I'm not going to say because we're being broadcast.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Larry Hildes. You just heard from my wife. We live immediately outside the Bellingham city limits in Whatcom County. Thank you for the pretense of having an unannounced public hearing on the day that you're about to make the decision without giving anybody the time to actually see the document, have real input, have a proper public process. I mean, the question in my mind is, why even bother? I'm here speaking. You're not listening. If you were listening, you would have listened a year ago when people said, we want living wage jobs, we want real open space, we want habitat restoration, we don't want a giveaway, we want to save the granary, etc. You're not doing any of those things. If I'm a lawyer, we negotiate a great deal, we're in court a great deal. If somebody came to me and said, here's your opportunity to comment, we're signing this in an hour, I would be in court so fast saying there was a total lack of proper process. There are rules of procedure to prevent exactly what you're doing here. And we still want all the things that we wanted. I don't think somewhere along the line, the synapses are not firing. You're not realizing you work for us. You don't own the waterfront. You don't own this property. You don't own this development. We do. We put up the risks. We put up the money. We get the benefit of the loss. Instead, you came up with a process that was utterly disrespectful of the public and that was worthless, and now you're justifying it by going after the first bidder you've got, which is a company with a long history of cut and run. I do have things to say against Harcourt. Long history of cut and run, long history of not paying decent wages, and a long history of not following through on projects. But now you can say, look, we're performing our fiduciary responsibility. We've got a developer. They're lousy. They have a terrible record. They're always the first ones in on a project like this and always the first ones out the door, leaving you with nothing. But we've justified our existence because somebody's buying our property at a giveaway rate. This is disgraceful. This community deserves better than you. This community deserves better than this. This community deserves better than Harcourt. We want actual open space that isn't poisonous. We want actual jobs that don't pay at the rate of a barista. We want actual living wage jobs on our waterfront. Your idea of being the guardians of the public land is like the idea of the fox that's the guardian of the empty hen house after it's eaten everything in it. I don't know how you're making money off of this, but it's very clear to me we're not, and we deserve a lot better.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Yes.
I'll talk from here. I'm Suzanne Kite. I live here in Bellingham, and I am not a current boat owner. I don't really have anything to do with anything in or on the port at this time, and I have no interest in one way or another, except that I want to know, what are you folks going to do tonight? What is your vote going to be? After you've heard the public comment from this afternoon and what you've heard here now, obviously there's a lot of emotion, and I'm doing it myself. I just don't have any faith in anything I've ever heard or read about most of you on the Port Commission. Mike, I know you've done a lot of good and you're bucking a lot of odds, but the rest of you, I think, are inept and incompetent, and I don't think that you should be serving the public, because the truth is, you don't.
Suzanne, thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment, public comment, before we close the public comment period? Last chance. Yes, sir?
Hi there, I'm Ryan Roberts. I haven't been given a ton of time to review the documents, but just in doing a quick find word on there, I see limited reference to protected bike lanes in this area. There are numerous studies done by peopleforbikes.org, the organization that has over 1 million followers currently, on the benefits of having expanded bicycle use and limited traffic with cars. We're talking 50% increase in revenues, 70 to 80% increase in rent. We're talking livable wage jobs where people actually visit the place via bicycle. They don't have to find parking. You don't need parking because you have bicycles there and people can get there easily by that means. I see really limited reference to it, and again, I'm going to spend a bit more time reviewing the document itself, but I would like to see a greater emphasis on this wonderful downtown area and the potential it has to be expanded in a way that that not just enables, but really promotes the use of bicycles, promotes healthy downtown visitors, and promotes perhaps the use of bike shares, things of this sort. To pass up that opportunity would be a grievous mistake, I think. And we have ample evidence in San Francisco and plenty of other cities of the benefit of expanding those bicycle areas. To have an area that is entirely dominated by vehicle traffic will not do this area justice. I think it's very important that we take a very clear look at what the benefit of having a more bicycle-friendly downtown expansion would look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudd, for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? Commissioner would ask if we could take a 5-minute break, so I will grant that.
Thank you.
Anyone like to take a 5-minute break? Thank you. We'll recess for 5 minutes. Turn your mics on. We'll reconvene the public meeting of the Port Commission. First of all, I think I'll start it off by, there was a lot of comment that we haven't had much public time for the public to hear about the waterfront development and what's going on. I'd like to call on Sylvia from our planning department to, if you could, I hate to put you on the spot, Sylvia, but could you just, for the record and for the folks, go over what meetings we've had on this process?
Yes, I'd like to do that. Sylvia Goodwin, Planning Director here at the Port. We have been working on this project, well, for the public comment and the public input portion of the project for over 10 years. And we have not ignored it all. There's been a lot of good comments during this process from the public on both the environmental impact statement and the plan and the development regulations. We've worked with the city, and the plan has changed. There's been input on having more bicycle trails and less pedestrian orientation. There's bicycle trails through the whole plan. There was comments on parks. The parks got bigger. The development moved back from the shoreline. We heard comments on living wage jobs, and we set aside a good portion of the property for living wage jobs and for not for mixed use. So,
excuse me,
excuse me, I'm trying to talk and I didn't interrupt you.
I think it's ironic that
please show the respect that we did for you when you spoke, sir. We'd appreciate it.
Show us the respect by having a public process and not glossing one over now.
Okay, if I can finish, please, then we can have more discussion. So we had a long process. We had a public process by both the port and the city and adopted the plan. And what we're doing tonight, the development proposed, is consistent with that plan. But I want to talk a little bit more. Mr. Fix gave an overview at the beginning, but to remind people, this is not a process that started 2 weeks ago. This is not a public hearing tonight anyway. It is a public comment period. But we started this process with Harcourt in September of last year, or in 2013, and we have had many public meetings talking about the development, the RFQ, the selection of Harcourt. It was an input from both the city, the county, Western Washington University, and Harcourt was selected over a year ago. It's taken that long to get all of the details of this proposal. But during that time, the Port Commission has had a number of briefings. The exclusive negotiating agreement between the Port and Harcourt has been about a year ago. So there has been a lot of time, there's been a lot of opportunity for comment, and there's been many public briefings. So it is a little discouraging that people tonight maybe haven't been following that, but it's been in the newspaper, it's been on the website, and I think there's been lots of opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sylvia.
We're not supposed to have to go to your website to find out what you're doing. You're supposed to be telling us.
Why I signed up last year, so I would get notices, and I haven't been.
No. So it may be a year, but it's a year if you're not actually informing us. You can do that for 10 years, and it's still not a public process.
Thank you. So I guess we need to go over the first action, read the first action item, and then have discussion. Is that?
Wait 1 second. I would like to go through the, I've written down everybody's name. I won't mention the names, but I would like to discuss the comments, not every single one, but at least bring them up so that if Jim and Dan would like to respond to those, that'd be great. I do not want to suggest that this is a debate between myself or the commission and those who are here, but I do want to definitely bring these points up and have a conversation with my fellow commissioners about these points that were raised tonight. And I think now is the time to do it before because it's not specifically germane to the first action item, if that's okay.
It's fine.
All right. So there was a question about Central Street remaining open to the public. That is part of the master plan that was coordinated with city input. So that is going to remain, as far as I know, in perpetuity. There was a question about tying the Central Street promenade, that's what I'm going to call it, to this particular agreement. It's a separate issue because it's going to remain a city right-of-way, but it will be, it's in the master plan as a public promenade, so that's going to go there. I have raised, specifically, I've raised issues about making sure that that Harcourt can tie the building back to Central Street because it's a missing piece of infrastructure between Central Street and the building. So that hopefully will be addressed and shouldn't be a big problem for them. There was a point about retail and hospitality that's in our plan. I think that was more addressed to our master plan. So I can see that point is still coming back up. I don't know how to address it other than just saying that that's all part of our master plan, which is not this agreement, by the way. That's the master plan for the entire properties. Sea level rise, always a concern. I think that will be addressed by the engineers that have to deal with the structures that are being proposed. So I think that will come up in the future. The price for the granary building has come up several times, and I will be honest with everybody that at one time I proposed that we give it away for free, and that would be problematic from the state auditor's point of view. But in my estimation, it's important that we get that property back in play, and we can do it now because it's standing. Now, of course, we didn't have to give it away, right? We did sell it for $200,000. There was an offer, another offer of $220,000 during the RFP process. We didn't go that direction. We went with Harcourt instead. But regardless, that building will be paid for. And whether you dispute the price or not, that's what the price is that we agreed on.
Mike, I'd like to make a comment on that, on the price for the granary building. I've had as many constituents call me, write me, and say they would just as soon not keep the granary building as keep it. The city was adamant about keeping it, and so I'm in favor of keeping it. Harcourt decided they wanted to keep it as well. But if we were to tear that building down, like so many people suggested, then it would be worth nothing. In fact, it would be the expense of tearing it down and starting over. So make sure when you look at the whole scope of it, you also look at if that was torn down and rebuilt.
You can't rebuild it.
Well, that's the other problem. You have to keep part of it there, or you'd have to build back farther. Exactly. Do you have any comment?
In regards to, excuse me, in regards to that issue, I think it would be fair to say that when you have a piece of property that's been sitting there for almost 12 years, and we've tried various methods and means to get it sold, to get it on the market. We've had temporary setbacks with Department of Ecology, we've had setbacks with the city, we've had setbacks, a lot of them, a lot of things going on, making it very difficult to get that project going. And I think that I'm just speaking strictly for myself when I say this, and that is I would see that $200,000 price as somewhat of an incentive for Harcourt to get busy on the project and start something and get their planning and so forth and so on. I would see that as a positive instead of a negative, because it obviously hasn't worked before. It's been sitting there for that many years. And I don't know particularly how you feel about that, but that's my opinion.
Continue, Mike.
Sure. There have been some conversations or suggestions that $20 per square foot is too low. I think we can address that here in a little while as we talk through it. There was a comment about bomb trains, which I also share in that sentiment. But of course that's completely out of our control. What's on those tracks we can complain about all day long. The alternative would be to not build anything next to the tracks, of course. Access over the railroad, I think that's going to be happening as we move forward. Kelly Linville earlier today suggested that, to me specifically, that yes, indeed, they do have the money to build that infrastructure. So I don't doubt that we will have proper access over the tracks. The toxic hazards must be addressed. That's in there. That's part of the cleanup. Whether you agree with the cleanup or not, it's all going to happen before they build anything. At least the plan that we have now. Let's see. Liquefaction issues, of course, are a concern. They've been a concern of mine as well. We do know we're in a seismically active area, and this filled-in waterfront is classified as a Class F, which is the lowest classification, which also means it's probably the most dangerous place to build, but that also means that the building permits would never be issued without satisfying the engineers that something can stand and safely in an earthquake. Let's see. There was a suggestion we let people use the site now. I don't disagree with that. However, there are some problems with that. I can give you an example. 3 years ago, we opened the sites so folks could watch the fireworks from the old GP Pier, and to satisfy some of the agency requirements, we had to stripe a lane, it's about 10 feet wide, on both sides, and keep everybody in the lane, as well as sweeping the lane to make sure that there was no dust that was kicked up while they were walking there. So I don't think we'll be able to open it up right away, unfortunately, without a massive investment for that. So I doubt that's going to happen, just to be honest with you. The remediation question, again, that's going to be taken care of. The ASB has come up again. This is not a conversation that we've had with Harcourt, because they're not going to be building a marina for us. Let's see. Harcourt is not putting any upfront money down. They are, in fact, doing that. They're paying outright for the granary property and $20 a square foot for the building 2 and whatever associated property is necessary for to support that building. We just don't know right this minute exactly what that building will be. I'll address that in a second here. Let's see. Yes, taxpayers are shouldering the burden. That was the choice that the Port of Bellingham made, along with the City of Bellingham in 2005, I think was when the agreement was signed. Now, we can still complain about it today, but that's where we are today as well. That was a choice that was made almost 10 years ago. So doing the best we can at this point is the best we can, but we can't go back. The taxpayers took on this burden. So we can complain about it all day long, and I've done so as well, but that's where we are today. And it's the fact we are shouldering a huge and tremendous burden here. So I won't downplay that, but it also isn't something we can just erase. Let's see. The public should have more time to weigh in on this particular plan. This one's tricky, and this is where it almost sounds like I'm going to be lecturing. I've been here 5 years, and I'll tell you, not one time have we signed a lease or a land transaction where we gave it to the public first and then asked for them to tell us what was wrong with it, what was right with it, and then we take it back and do what the public said. That's not what ports do. It's a little bit difficult to describe in a few short words how we make these transactions, but that's why we're elected. Sometimes it's hard to sit here and look at people and know that you didn't have a public process, but we don't do that. Ports don't do that. There are 75 ports in the state. We don't take our leases and land transactions out to the public and say, is this okay? That's why we're elected. If we screw it up, you unelect us. Now, we're very different than cities and counties in this respect. It's a very, very different process. If you don't like the process, that's one thing. But we are very, very different in how we do these things. Tonight's vote is not, well, I'll leave that for later discussion. Are we giving away too much to private interests? Maybe. But we had one developer show up to this conversation. There were 2 options here. One, we do nothing and do the cleanup, or we go with this developer and do the cleanup. Those are our options. Nothing or go with this developer. We chose to go with this developer. We had the contract discussed behind closed doors. It's a land contract. That's how it's done. All the cities and all the counties do the exact same thing. Even the state does that. There's a question about dioxin on Cornwall. That's not part of this discussion. There was a point that the port is not taking care of the granary building. We are. We are not dealing with enough open space. That was negotiated with the city through public process for the number of acres that we have in the master plan. That we are not developing proper amounts of habitat. I don't know that I totally disagree with that, and I would like to see a little bit more, especially in the log pond. The living wage jobs issue, that was something that was brought to the city council and was not widely received, so that did not make it into our master plan. And of course, bicycles, I think that I'd like to see better, more complete streets in the master plan as well. But again, that was something that was negotiated between the commission and the city council. So, you know, I would like to see more Vooners and that sort of thing on the waterfront, but they're not quite in there. So if anybody, Jim, Dan, if you want to tackle any of these points right now,
Okay,
that'd be great.
Jim, go ahead. Do you have any?
Well, I don't want to be too nasty what I say, but I'm going to make a statement that deals with attitudes. I've been with the port, like I said, for almost 12 years, and I've seen nothing but positive attitudes at the port as far as projects, as far as meetings, conferences, just you name it, and it's been a great group of people to work with. Very, very much on the positive side. Some of you, I won't speak to who, you probably know who you are, but I'm going to say it anyway, and that some of you are, I just wonder if it's possible for you to have a positive thing to say about the Port of Bellingham.
We wonder too. Maybe you should do some positive things and we'll have a positive attitude toward you.
Maybe you're the only person that feels that way, I'm not sure.
Right, and everybody else in Bellingham just loves you and wants to have a parade in your honor.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm glad you have a positive attitude about yourself. You don't work for yourself, you work for us. If we have a negative attitude towards what you're doing, then you need to look at what you're doing, not us being negative. I'm glad that you all pat each other on the back. That's not your job.
Excuse me, sir, this isn't a public debate. Commissioner Jorgensen would like to make his comments.
Well, I would like to respond to his comments.
That's
He's
fine.
making obnoxious, insulting comments at us.
Was I talking to you specifically? You must be...
No, everyone.
Everyone, and we are responding collectively.
Okay. I don't want to get any more of an argument. We're not here to be argumentative, I hope. But it just gets to be disappointing sometimes when we have public hearings and we have people come to speak that we hear a lot of the negative stuff, and it'd be nice if somebody walked in the door and said, wow, you guys did a project such and such, so on. That was really great. And we must do one of those once in a while.
Excuse me. This behavior is so rude. We're here for public discourse. We're here to hear all sides of this. Everyone feels very passionate about this. This is our collective waterfront, but descending into rudeness and sarcasm and belittling doesn't belong here. Very inappropriate.
So they can destroy our waterfront, but we have to be nice?
No, the way you're acting, sir, is completely unprofessional and unproductive.
Excuse me.
It's
I didn't realize you were my professional review board. I have one of those.
You're detracting.
Excuse me, is there a microphone in the room? A portable microphone, anyone?
No.
If you would go to the podium so that we can capture your
Commissioners,
comments, that'd be great.
let me just say, having represented governments for 30 years, without comment on the whatever the discourse is, I advise the commission, it's up to you whether you want to have a discourse at this point. This is the public's business. The law in the state of Washington says you conduct business in an open public meeting. It does not say you engage in a discourse, unless you want to, on every point with the public. I would advise you to conduct your meeting. I would also advise you that, like this woman said, people always feel passionate about a variety of issues in front of the public. Typically, people are very polite. There's a time for public comment, a time for your action. It's totally up to you, but there is no requirement that you get into this kind of back and forth with members of the public who feel particularly strongly about a particular issue.
I apologize for bringing that up. That was my sticking my foot in my mouth.
It's up to you, Commission President, to...
I'm sorry about that.
Yes, I do think it's important that the commissioners get to make comments. And I think it's important that you hear what a commissioner thinks and why he's how we're deliberating on a decision. So as long as we can keep the public comment to the public comment period and let the commissioners state their case and why they're doing what they're doing, so at least you'll know, we can continue with it. But I have to agree, if this continues, we'll just vote and not give you our opinion.
Excuse me, Dan, but it seems to me that you're asking to have a monologue rather than a conversation.
I'm not asking for that. I'm asking Commissioner Jorgensen to make any comments he has or deliberation on what has been presented.
And it seems to me, as a member of the public, and I have to say I've never been to one of these meetings before, and now I understand why, but it seems to me that you can hear, but you're not listening. And there's a huge difference. Thank you. And when you're talking about what your beliefs are, after you've heard all the public comment, basically seems to me, and perhaps others, I don't know, that you're stuck in the mud. Your feet are stuck in the mud. You will not move. You will not change your opinions or acknowledge that anybody else perhaps might be correct. It's not just you. As been said before, you folks represent us, and you represent our wants and desires.
Okay, do you have anything else to say, Jim?
No, I don't.
I do want to make a couple of comments, and if the public feels they need to join in, then I'll knock off you won't get to hear my feelings on these issues. One, the $20 per square foot, we have sold property at $21 a square foot that was completely clean not too long ago that the Bellwether was built on. This property that we're selling at $20 a square foot, there could be some impacts to the developer that could cost him dearly. And that's the reason for the $20 a square foot in my eyes. We've had 3 law firms look at this contract to get their feedback. Commissioner McCauley, Commissioner Jorgensen, and myself have gone over all of those, and we've looked at the pluses and the minuses of them in detail. This contract took over a year to negotiate, back and forth. It's not perfect. No contract is perfect, but this contract is a good one. I would hope that Harcourt wouldn't say that it's perfect for them, but a good one. But probably the biggest comment I've had from the folks in this community is, how long is it going to be before you folks can do something with that brownfield? Well, here's an opportunity to move forward with it. And that's been the bulk of what I've heard. And that's the reason for the vote I will take today. I'm proud of the work that we've done on this agreement. Tara Sundin with the city, Ted Carlson, Tara's here. Tara, thank you very much for all your hard work. The staff has worked countless hours. Rob has talked earlier about the time difference. He's up in the middle of the night talking to people at Harcourt to get this all negotiated and back and forth. Frank Shop has worked tirelessly on this. Mike Stoner, Brian Goring, and Diane McLean, thank you very much for all the work you've done. Sometimes when you hear these public comments, you don't realize how much of the behind-the-scenes work that's taken place. One other point I'd like to make is the default schedule. The default schedule is to protect the port. When you put a default schedule into an agreement, it's almost a negative, but it's for our protection. They can develop this much faster if there are tenants to fill the spaces. So it's really a default schedule. Gentlemen, do either of you have any other comment, or we can move to the first action item?
No, not right now. I'll bring them up. No.
Okay. Diane, if you could read the first action item, please.
To approve Resolution Number 1340 of the Board of Commissioners of the Port of Bellingham, declaring certain property in the waterfront district surplus to the needs of the port.
Sylvia, if you could. comment?
Sylvia Goodwin, Planning and Development Director. This motion is required by law that the Port Commission, before selling property, declares that it is surplus to the needs of the port. The Commission has done this through the process that we went through in the environmental impact statement and the master plan. It was always contemplated that the property would be sold. That was addressed in the EIS, it was addressed in the master plan, and when we adopted the master plan in December of 2013, Resolution 1328, adopted it as a comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. That's according to the RCWs, and at that point declared the roads, the parks, and the Western Washington University site surplus, and then mentioned that it was contemplated that other lands would either be leased or sold, but we would bring it back each time we sell port property to look at that particular parcel, decide are those surplus to the port, and adopt another resolution. So that is what this resolution is today, would declare this 18.8 acres surplus to the port so that that property can be sold for development.
And Commissioners, if I could add this agreement itself, obviously, each time Harcourt proposes a project other than the granary building, which the port required that they build, they need to come to the port with a plan. You need to approve the plan, and then they need to tell you if they're going to buy the property or lease the property, and then the price. And there's an exhibit in here for a form of a lease, a form of a purchase and sale agreement. So what this surplus resolution says, out of an abundance of caution, really, is to the extent necessary in this agreement, that this agreement creates some right, this property is deemed surplus for the purposes of this agreement. The only thing that really will be surplus under this agreement right away is the granary building, because that's the first project they're undertaking, and we have to create the legal lot of record, and then they have to buy the property and move on from there.
Don't leave, Sylvia, please. So, a point of clarification, especially for folks who are watching maybe this for the first time. We updated our scheme of harbor improvements, and we had a public hearing about that. And when we updated our scheme of harbor improvements regarding this particular property, in that update, we said that this land, that specifically the ones we're talking about now, would be leased or sold at some point in the future. So the public process where we had a public hearing regarding the lease or sale of this land happened during our update of our scheme of harbor improvements.
It was addressed then. It was also addressed by the Commission in '05 when you first acquired the property. The intent from the very beginning, and has been discussed at each step along the way, is that some of the property would be retained in public ownership. The parks and the parts for marine trade, we've always talked about being more appropriate in public, and we've always contemplated selling the mixed-use property for development. So yes, it was addressed in the public hearing, but it's been addressed many other times throughout the discussion.
Okay, thank you. That's one of the questions I have.
Anything else, Mike? Jim? Hearing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Could you please read the next action item, Diane?
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute a master development agreement with Harcourt Bellingham LLC for the first 18.8 acres of mixed-use development within the waterfront district.
So, Commission, this is the master development agreement we've been talking about for the past month or so. When you first saw this, I believe it's a good agreement. I believe it's a fair agreement. It did take a good amount of negotiating. Is everyone in the community going to be happy with it? Clearly not. I have been out in the community, though, at different user groups, the Chamber of Commerce, Whatcom Business Alliance, and various other groups talking to the community. I probably talked to over 100 folks. And it's unanimous to those folks that I've talked to. I have not heard one negative comment. Today is the first time, and this is despite me saying 2 weeks ago in a public meeting that to reach out to me with any questions or concerns you have. Not one citizen has approached me with a concern. So the feedback I'm getting from the community is very positive, very bullish on the agreement. I've seen Harcourt's, the result of their work. I don't believe they're cut and run, as you heard earlier. In fact, I talked to employees at Harcourt that had been there for 25 plus years in the exact same development that Harcourt built and owned then 25 years later. Everything I saw of Harcourt was a build and hold. It was not a build and sell. That doesn't mean they haven't done that in the past. It's just not the developments I saw, and I don't believe it's what their intent is for our community. So I urge you to pass this agreement. I think it's a very fair agreement for our community. I think it's going to put some current brownfield site to work that's been sitting there unused for the past 15 years probably. And it'll put jobs down the site, it'll put the site on the tax rolls, and it'll get some economic activity going down in that area of our town. It'll also bring our community to its waterfront, which has been long needed.
Thank you, Rob. Any comments?
Yeah, let me start. I think it's no secret, especially to the staff here, that some people consider me, and maybe even myself, as a ridiculously critical person. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. My wife sometimes is not okay with that, but I'm okay with that. This agreement's not freaking me out, and I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you what's new in this agreement that seems new. This agreement, what Harcourt will do, is exactly what is in the master plan. And that master plan was agreed upon by the city and the port with lots and lots of public input. Now, you might not like the public input that was in the master plan, but that's the agreement we're working on right now. This is a land sale. The builder on this property will have to build nothing but what's in the master plan. There's a lot of wiggle room in there, and I criticize a lot of that myself because there's a lot in the master plan that I don't agree with. But there's 7 members of the city council that agree with that master plan and 3 members of this commission that agree with that master plan, and that's what we're working within. So what I see as new here, and I would like to have a quick discussion about it is, and some of it has come up, we put out a proposal for about 11 acres, and we are now looking at not selling, but that they have options to develop. Harcourt does 18 acres. If you would, Rob, can you describe how we went from 11 to 18, because that's different than what we started with the RFP.
And Commissioner, I do mean to interrupt you.
Sure.
But politely.
You're going to clarify the option thing, huh, aren't you?
You are.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I must admit, Commissioner McCauley read every word of this document, and as the other commissioners, they all have asked very good questions. I met with the commissioners one-on-one, and Commissioner McCauley even found a typo or two in his reading of this 43-page agreement. But there is no options, and I use the term option in terms of a legal term of a right to acquire property. Technically, I want to be clear with the commissioners, this is an executory contract. It gives them the exclusive right to develop property as long as they develop according to a schedule. But they acquire a property right when they come to us with a purchase and sale agreement or a lease agreement that you approve subject to this agreement. And you can't say no for any reason. It has to be under the agreement. And then they have to go to the city and get permits to build a structure consistent with the master plan and consistent with city building codes and requirements. So
thank you.
The legal term option,
yes.
Commissioners.
Don't quote me on
what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So it is correct. We started our RFP for I'm sorry. That's me. Oh, that was you. So it is correct that we started our RFP with a 10-acre site. That was conversations we had with our internally here. It's conversations we had with our consultant. At the time, the market hadn't quite rebounded to the extent that it had today, so we thought 10 acres was a prudent amount to bring onto the market. As we entered into talks with Harcourt after they were selected as being the developer of choice, it became apparent that 10 acres was not going to, A, be enough to interest them, and B, was going to worry them that they were going to have competition on the land just adjacent to where they would be developing. And so one of the ways we got over that for them was that we gave them the 18 acres. It started off having 2 phases. We do, okay, you do phase 1 of 10 acres, and if you're successful in phase 1 of 10 acres, then we'll give you phase 2 as another 10 acres. After the legal teams went through that, they determined there really wasn't any advantages to doing that way, and it was a much simpler agreement and kept the pages down, which seems to be a concern. We kept it down to 43 pages by just making it 1 phase at 18.8 acres. The 18.8 acres was arrived at because it's just how the parcels fit together the best.
Okay. So another thing that's new that the public hadn't seen before, for the reasons that I probably poorly explained earlier about how we negotiate land leases and sales, is a $20 per square foot price on the land. And the appraisal documents that we have, it's a bit higher than that. Can you discuss how we got to $20 an acre in the negotiations?
Yeah, the $20 a foot for the land is based on previous transactions the port did, the appraisals that the port obtained, and also on what we considered to be the complications of constructing on this site. The appraisal didn't necessarily take all that into consideration. It took some of it into consideration, but the developer believed that it was going to cost them more to build on this site than, say, it would on something like the Bellwether Peninsula.
And it's also important to note there were two appraisals.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry if I mischaracterized that. And then the third thing that the public hadn't seen before is the value of the granary. Can you discuss how we came to the $200,000 there?
Well, most of the port staff believed that the granary building was valueless. In fact, it was a liability that would cost us about $500,000 to tear down. So we think there's about a half acre associated with the granary building, and we thought with the amount of extra construction cost it's going to cost to bring that up to a habitable form or habitable state, we thought $200,000 was a very fair price. We did have an offer for $225,000 from another developer. However, that offer also included some additional parking requirements, some additional land for that parking requirement. So I think we're pretty pari passu, we're pretty similar to the other developer's offer.
So two offers with price tags attached to them, relatively similar offers.
Correct.
Okay.
And one thing to note, there's no way Harcourt cannot develop the granary building.
No, they must develop the granary building as their first project, and it must be completed by 2019, or they are out.
Thank you.
You know, it seems to me that the public comment we had today is a lot that I think I've heard and we've all heard before, both this earlier today and this evening. It seems to me that there's a misunderstanding about what this agreement actually is, which is a land transaction, and the master plan, which is an overriding documents that say what's going to happen on these properties. So in this case, we're selling a parcel of land to a developer to, one, repurpose the granary building, I think in a way that's consistent with what the public has desired in the past. It seems consistent with the other three proposals to reuse that structure. All of them were essentially the same with somewhat different mixed uses upstairs. So I don't see that that's dramatically different. And then the first building that's, that Harcourt will be required to build is, again, well within the bounds, or will have to be well within the bounds of the master plan, which, again, is very different from what this agreement is. This is simply a sale of the land, and once they start to build, that's when we're going to see where they are complying or proposing their structure to be in compliance with the master plan. So I think the criticisms on the master plan notwithstanding, I really, in this agreement, want to stay focused on what's, I think, could be the biggest criticisms, and that's, did we get a fair value for the property? And that is I don't know, but I don't know that we didn't either, because we had 4 proposals for this property. Only one was willing and able to step up and make an offer through a negotiated process, the same process that this organization has gone through forever. We came out to a price of $20 per square foot, discounts for various things and unknowns that are under the ground. Could we have gotten a better price if we let the land sit idle and to some point in the future? Possibly. Is there a guarantee that we would? Probably not. I'll say possibly. I personally think we probably could have. But we made a decision that we wouldn't wait. And that's what we're faced with right now, is we can either go back, turn back the clock and wait, do the cleanup and wait for something better, or we can put this property back to use now. This commission chose to put the property back to use now, starting now. And that's why we're voting on this today, because that's what we're doing. We're going to sell this first piece of property. The first building's going to roll out. And I think, well, we know what the granary is going to look like because that's what it looks like. So in the conversations that we had today, you know, I definitely wanted to address the public comments, but it seemed to me that nearly all of that public comment was a criticism of the past and a criticism of the master plan. But we're not debating the master plan today. We're debating this land sale. Now, to me, the big issue is the average citizen of Whatcom County getting a square deal on this? I think we're doing pretty okay, and I think we should start moving now.
Why should we finance it, Mike?
That was a decision. The question about why should we finance it. In 2005, the port decided this is a property they wanted, and there are costs associated with that property. The city signed up and said, we will also be a part of this. The people that were elected in 2005, on your behalf, decided that this would be financed by the public. And financed in the case of, I think you mean the public, the infrastructure and those sorts of things.
No.
Yep.
The 2.75% or LIBOR plus 2 financing giveaway for Harcourt. Aren't they not capable of financing their own development?
Let me address that,
Yeah, if you would please address that. It's a state.
Let me address that because some people have asked that question. So, when somebody buys property in the state of Washington, and I'm sure most of you know this, they go to a bank or something and they get a mortgage. And the mortgage is in a first position against the title to the property. It's actually technically in second position. Taxes are always first position on property. Second position is a mortgage. We also in Washington call those deeds of trust.
Also lawyer fees.
Lawyer fees should be first, but also called a deed of trust. So anybody, myself included, you buy a house, you have a deed of trust. The deed of trust is a form of a mortgage. It's also possible to sell property under a real estate contract. And that's not like a purchase and sale agreement when you close at the title company. A real estate contract is where the seller finances the purchase of the property. And the seller keeps what's called legal title and the buyer gets equitable title. The Revised Code of Washington allows ports to sell property under a real estate contract. And so if you look at this transaction, Harcourt can lease the property using the port's standard lease as a starting place, just like 400 other tenants do. They can buy the property outright, and presumably if they buy the property, they'll finance it. They'll go to a bank or wherever they get their money. They're an international company. They may get their money from something other than a bank, insurance companies or a trust or something. Or they could ask the port to to finance it as the RCW allows. And the RCW provides the parameters of that transaction. The part that the port negotiated was the interest rate, which is LIBOR plus 2 points. LIBOR is the London Interbank Overnight Rate. So why do people use LIBOR? Because it's a known, measurable rate that you can find every day. It's the rate in London that banks lend money to each other. LIBOR plus 2 right now is probably... LIBOR is 2.71?
Plus 2.
Yeah, 271, and the port can invest its funds.
I'm sorry, we get about 1/8 of 1% on the money we have in the bank, and we're very restricted in how we can invest our money. We participate in what's called the LGIP, the Local Government Investment Pool. It's run by the state treasurer, and that yields us approximately 1/8, sometimes up to 1/4 of 1%.
So I want to make two other points. So if the port got $1 million for a piece of property, it could put it into the bank at about 1/8 of 1%. If Harcourt paid it over time, they'd pay the port 2.71%. However, this is something that's very important to understand. That agreement provides that the port's financing always remains in first position on the piece of property. So in order for Harcourt to elect to utilize the port contract procedure, the real estate contract procedure, which is somewhat beneficial to the port because instead of 1/8, you're getting 2.71, the port's contract position remains in first position. We don't pay taxes, so it's actually first position. And so what that tells you is at the time they go out and get financing for the property to build the building, they will have to practically, in my experience, buy the property and close out that contract because no bank will be in second position. They'll say, forget it, because if you don't pay the port, we lose our investment as the bank. So it's interesting, that's a very minor thing. It was in the port statutes. If you read the port statutes, the port has a right to sell it under that. And Harcourt merely said, we want the flexibility. Either we're going to lease property under a long-term lease, like many tenants do and build a building. Example would be Woodstone. Built a building on port lease property. the bellwether developments are on leased property. Buy the property, and we've sold property before, or buy it under a real estate contract, in which case the port will remain in first position and could, if they had enough money, they could build a building and pay us 2.71% till it's paid off. Or when they go out and get financing, they'll have to pay off the real estate contract because no bank is going to allow us to be ahead of them. So it really was designed with the concept that this is going to extend over a long period of time and you want some flexibility. I should say LIBOR is 0.71 today, but LIBOR floats up. As interest rates float up, that's why people pick LIBOR, so does LIBOR float up, because LIBOR is the rate banks charge each other. So we're going to say, give us the rate banks charge each other plus 2 percentage points. That part was negotiated. The rest of the part in that small subsection is related to the revised Code of Washington relative to ports transferring property. Long explanation, but I'm a lawyer, so I have a lot to say always. Sorry.
I'll give you the finance guy's condensed version of that. If they choose this option, we get 2.71% interest. We keep a first position on the deed of trust. If they default, we get the property back. That seems like a pretty good deal to me. If they want to build a building on the property, they have to go out and finance that building, because I doubt that they're going to do it with their own equity. That would be highly unusual. And any bank or any lender coming into this situation is going to demand that they take the port out, so that the lender is now in first position instead of the port. So very little risk of the port carrying this financing beyond the initial stages of construction of the building.
The only thing I would say would be better is if we sold them the property on a real estate contract, they built a building, and then they defaulted.
Then we get the building.
Then we'd get the land and the building. That'd be even.
CAP did, right? And then that didn't really work out.
Well, you go back in history, Mr. Johnson. That wasn't precisely what CAP did, but that was a long time ago. But in any event, that would be the theory. They are not going to they cannot finance the building as long as it's under a real estate contract to us. Again, they're an international firm. They may have other avenues we're not aware of that would be willing to go in second position. But any of you could ask yourself, would you be willing to go in second position for a sizable loan behind somebody else who's already lent money on the property and has security? That's what we do when we keep the real estate contract. We have the first position on it.
Why didn't you, excuse me, when you put out the RFP looking for potential bidders, of which we ended up getting one, why didn't you tell the potential bidders that the port was willing to have seller financing? The second question is, it's a finance question, but if our court paid the port cash, couldn't you use that money to pay down the port's $50 million in debt? And what is the cost of that money?
That money, those are great questions, by the way. You usually do ask good questions of me, and if anyone wants to know if someone's keeping our finance department on toes, trust me, it's being looked after. We've had several conversations in that regard. You know, the RFP one is a good question. We didn't see it as that big of an advantage to a developer because, quite frankly, as soon as they take down a piece of property, they're going to start building on it, and so they're not going to be able to carry a note with the port. It's not practical. And so that's probably the biggest reason we didn't put it into the RFP. The port the port pays about 3.5% on its bond money. Some of those bonds might be callable in the near term, but a very small portion of them are. A majority of our debt, which was issued in 2010, $44 million, that issuance can't be called. I think it's 2025 is the first year that debt can be called. Now, could we have issued callable bonds that we could have gotten to earlier? Yeah, but then we would have paid a higher interest rate on them. So it's always that juggling act of, okay, how long are we going to hold this debt for, and how big of an interest payment do we want to, how much of an interest penalty do we want to have to make those bonds callable earlier? We chose to have them called in 2025. So I don't think it's a big advantage to call those bonds. It's not possible, I guess, to call those bonds.
Liquor and leverage being debt, are two of the things that take down companies and people. Mm-hmm. And if you don't believe that, all you got to do is look at this last debacle on real estate. Leverage was the issue. Zero down, and you didn't have to have it.
Absolutely.
So it worries me a little bit when the port's debt just about doubles in the last 4 years. And so it's more of a concern to the commissioners that continuing to increase that debt just guarantees the taxpayers got more to pay. I mean, I'm trying to look at it from the taxpayer's position. It's not port debt.
Yep.
It's taxpayer debt.
And Doug, like I said, we issued 2010. We issued 44 million of those bonds. We have some other bonds, but they're very small issuances compared to that one. And that was largely done for our airport terminal expansion, which has seen, on average, probably 15% revenue growth over the last 10 years. So something had to be done there for the infrastructure to keep up with the demand, and that's why we issued those bonds. There's no, we have a 5-year plan out there, and there's nothing in that 5-year plan that contemplates issuing any more debt. It would have to be a really special and cash flow positive project for us to issue more debt. I just don't see that happening here in the near future. I think if you look at other ports' balance sheets, ports similar to our size, and let's talk about Everett, Vancouver, Edmonds, possibly Bremerton, you're going to find that their balance sheets carry a much higher percentage of debt to their assets than we do. Our debts is very low from a port's perspective. It's extremely low when you look at other governments outside the ports.
It is. Yeah. Commissioners, one other thing I might point out here is that when the Port of Bellingham bought the GP property in 2005, what the port actually did was take over liability for 5 very specific environmental projects. And when it did that, it did a couple of things. Number one, it partnered with Department of Ecology to provide funding for half of the cost of those projects. The second thing it did was, at the time, used port assets. So, in a sense, Mr. Carlberg's correct that it's a purchase, but it used port assets, about $23 million, to buy an insurance policy from AIG that pays the other half of those cleanup costs. And Georgia Pacific at the time said, well, if it goes over budget, Port, you're going to cover it, right? And we said, no, you're back in the soup. And they said, we don't like that. So Georgia Pacific bought an extra $25 million on top of that. The net effect of that is there's about $106 million of combination of insurance and what we anticipate to receive as ecology grants to do the cleanup on this property. So when you talk about the outlay of port cash, it was about $23 million. And AIG pays, when we send an invoice off to Ecology for a grant to pay for one of our environmental projects, 50% of it's paid by AIG, 50% of it's paid by Ecology. And it's just specific cleanups. And so in translating into this document, what we said to Harcourt was, we will do the cleanups that we are committed to do with Ecology. If during your construction you encounter other environmental conditions, that's on your nickel, Harcourt, is don't call the port. When you dig a hole and you find something, you have to handle the whatever you found in the hole. They don't have to chase it because Ecology is not going to require that, but they have to comply with the restrictions Ecology is, our partners at Ecology has worked with. So in another sense, Harcourt was experienced in brownfield development, willing to undertake that risk, because we said we are not going to go beyond what our insurance and Ecology grants carry us. We're not going to commit public assets if you find something in the ground. So that is a bit of a difference in this agreement compared with when we sell property to somebody else or we do something different. They've undertaken that risk.
What started this conversation is $21 the correct price? And there's no question in my civilian or military mind that if we waited, we could get more money for it. But as you heard my comments earlier, what I've heard from the community is when are we going to get rid of that brownfield and get something going down there. So I'm going to be proud to vote for this to get it going at this time at that price. Commissioner Jorgensen, did you have anything?
I was secretly talking.
No. Excuse me.
I would just, make a general statement more than specific. I'm not a financial advisor like Rob is, nor am I a financial advisor like our attorney is. So I listen to that and hope I understand the better part of it. But I'd like to just say a couple of things in general about the project from 2005 on up to today. And that we had a lot of humps along the way. Some real tough times, like I mentioned earlier, with various departments and so forth. But we weathered the storm, and I think we've done well. And we have a staff that has worked their tails off on this. I mean, literally have done all they can possibly do. And as a result, we came up with our developers that signed on to have their proposals looked at. We came up with a acceptance of Harcourt, and we found that that's not a perfect agreement, and I think that's been said by both Mike and Dan tonight. But it's a good one for where we're at, and it's a good one we can negotiate and get some decent things done yet. It's not over and done. And so with that in mind, and looking at the next steps that's on the screen, we're down to almost a commission action on the MDA. But the site preparation and cleanup, I mean, that's just the thought of that happening and shovels of dirt being moved and big equipment on that site is enough to make me get excited. I know that. It's been a long, long haul. And the Whatcom Waterway cleanup, we certainly wish that could be done to a deeper depth. I know Mike's talked about that many times, and it's some real difficulties there. And we have a phase 1 infrastructure and building construction begins, and we're there. And so having been involved with this longer than anybody up here at the table, I know how technical it's been and how difficult it's been, but we're going to do it. So I guess I'm telling the vote ahead of time.
I've got a further, I guess, point of clarification if Robin and Frank can weigh in on this. Retaining, right now the port, let me start this like this. So a quick example, I think, for the public. When the Bellwether project was being proposed, the proposal and the design and even the building materials were given, shown or given to the commission for approval. And I recall when I first came on board, there were stacks of literally building materials upstairs, and we could take a look at that and see if it met with our approval. So this is a little bit different than that. So how, as we move forward, for example, with Building 2, because we haven't seen it yet, although we do know it's going to be 40,000 square feet, and we know it's going to be compliant with the master plan, at what point is the commission retaining control in some semblance of what we've had with our past projects?
Commissioners, it's not quite like an empty lease where you say we will not give you the lease unless we like all the details of your plan down to the. I was here then too. I remember commissioners had a disagreement about whether it should look like the Monterey cannery or what it looks like now, and back and forth on Bellwether. Here, the curb lines for this developer in this agreement are compliance with the master plan documents. They have to mass a certain amount of mass because you don't want a bunch of small single-story buildings. And then you have reasonable approval rights over the entire project. In other words, you have to look at it and decide, does it look like they have a complete package here? The outside of the building is consistent with design standards at the city. The master plan document's consistent. Looks like they have a financing plan that's going to work. Everything looks consistent. So in some senses, it's more than, say, the Bellwether lease. But commissioners, make no mistake about it, you have to act reasonably. So you don't have the level of control that you had over the Bellwether where you say, I really like corrugated siding. No, I like, cedar shake siding. So you don't have that level of control. You have design standards, and maybe Sylvia can jump in here too. You have the master development agreement. And then you have to kind of look over the whole plan to make sure it's consistent with all those documents. So I would say it's more of a check each way. They check in with you each time and say, this is what we're doing, and you determine its consistency. Then they're going to go to the city, and the city's going to do a consistency analysis as well to make sure that these plans are consistent with all of the city regulations and the master plan documents and the design standards. Sylvia might have more to add.
So building, I think building 1, we pretty much know what it's going to look like, except nicer windows and paint. Building 2, that will come through us. The proposal will come through us. We'll check all these documents. Then it goes to the standard city process. It goes to the planning commission, and then to city council for approval.
I don't think it has to go to the planning commission because remember the city passed a planned action ordinance.
Okay.
So the city, and Tara's here, she can tell me if I'm wrong. She knows my partner John Sitkin's a land use guy, so I'm in deep water. I'll turn it over to Sylvia.
I'll comment. The city has a design review board, and they will take a look at the project.
Okay, thank you. Does the city council have the ultimate say on this? No. Who does? Planning department? Thanks.
Or if you'd like to speak, please do.
Yes.
Good evening, Tara Sundin, City of Bellingham. The City Council has already adopted the development regulations that Harcourt and anyone else that's going to develop in the waterfront are going to need to adhere to, despite, I guess, what the Port Commission decides. So it has to meet those development regulations. In addition to that, we have a design review board, and that review board is advisory to the planning director.
Okay.
So.
And then when they develop it, our agreement says they have to comply with all of the city requirements. Likewise, they have to comply with any restrictive covenants, environmental covenants placed on the property by the Department of Ecology. So you need to think of it as that they have kind of a box under which they can work, and it's possible to get outside the box, but they have to go down and see the city and go through a process to leave the box that's been constructed here.
Thank you. That's it for me. That wasn't funded, Hugh.
Yes, Skip.
Quick question about the agenda, which can you wait for just in the interest of the folks at home that are watching without the benefit of having an agenda, the agenda states that please feel free to submit further comments in writing. So I thought maybe if someone could clarify how long the comment period would be open and where they should send those comments, please.
Probably the best address would be info@portofbellingham.com, I believe is our generic email address. So I'd use info@portofbellingham.com for your comments. And we'll take your comments at all times. We're always happy to hear from you.
Okay, anything else, Mike?
Just one final statement. Yes, I have been ridiculously critical. This one is not freaking me out. What was freaking me out was the master plan. I didn't win all the battles that I wanted there, but everything that Harcourt has got to work within here is consistent with what is in the master plan, whether we like it or not. That was the agreed upon plan. Now, then I take a look at, did we get the best price for this piece of property? I believe that Rob, through his efforts, has done the best that we could get with the one developer that stepped up and stuck with it through the process. So I don't think Saturday morning quarterbacking or whatever the phrase is and saying, well, we could have done this and we could have done that. That's not how it works, because we had one developer walk through the door. They consistently stayed with the program. Rob did his best, negotiated a good deal, and we're deciding on that deal tonight. And I do believe it's the best deal that we have, that we could have gotten, and it's the one that we have in front of us, and I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Mike. Jim, do you have any further comments? Well, D-Day is here. Hearing, let's see, do you need to read it again? No, you've read it.
I shall.
Read the action item one more time, just so.
You're saying all over. Okay. Okay, a motion authorizing the executive director to execute a master development agreement with Harcourt Bellingham LLC for the first 18.8 acres of mixed-use development within the waterfront district.
One additional point, I'm sorry, before you vote. There may be a few non-substantive, but we may find some typo. I don't want you to think exactly as written. We're gonna, this is 43 pages and, you know, I'm sure there's gonna be a typo here or there we're gonna find. So with that understand, I don't think you need to make it part of the motion, but I just want that on the record. No substantive changes, we're done.
So my of will become an or? Is that what we're saying?
That'll be the first thing I ask.
Thank you. See, told you I'm ridiculously critical.
Hearing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0.
That's it.
Thank you very much for all of your hard work. Rob, really sincerely, thank you. Frank, you guys have just worked tirelessly on this. Sylvia, Mike, Brian, Tara, it's been a long, I mean, I've negotiated a lot of contracts, but never one that took a year. And thank you for all your hard work.
Commissioners, if I might, for public comment, written comments received, I will distribute to you for the record from Terry Montagna and from Doug Carlberg, sent in via emails.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And, is there any new business?
For coming.
One more quick thing. One more quick comment here on your agenda. It says that there's a, what was the meeting date that was on?
There, oh, yes, on the Marine Advisory Committee.
Say Tuesday, April 14th. Yeah, 2 weeks. That's correct.
That one's correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. The location is no longer at the Squalicum Harbor office. It's in this room.
Yeah. Correct. That's on April 14th. Yep. Anyone wanting to attend the MAC meeting? Marine Advisory Committee. No further business before us, gentlemen? Mike? Jim? Hearing nothing further, we adjourn.